Sup, my fellas, don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. Swordsmen who conquered half the world. Runkendals, a family of renowned swordsmen where everyone has exceptional talent and strength. Its members have become unsurpassed rulers of the world. Fight it out, conquer it, enslave them. That's the motto of the Runkendal family, the family to which Jean Runkendal belongs, the youngest of the Rankendellas. At the selection ceremony that determines your future, Jin chose the sword of the head of the family. This means that he is the one who will lead the Runkendal family. A mysterious man approached him and said that his choice met expectations. Interesting, Jin thought. Jin had no doubt that the future would bring him success and, of course, fame. But he doesn't see the point. After all, he has no talent for swordsmanship. Jin was called a disgrace to the various departments and was said to fall short of the standards of his family. He was considered the worst swordsman in the family's history. Even his own brothers joked about him practicing with a wooden sword. They said he wasn't worthy of the Barasada. Jin was silent, looking down. One of the brothers approached him and asked why he was silent. Then he kicked him in the stomach and ordered him to respond to his great brothers. Jin fell down clutching his stomach. Sitting on the floor, he reached for his sword, but his brother pinned down his arm. He said there was no point in training him, and Jin grumbled in pain. Then this guy holding a notebook in his hands asked, "What is it?" Haughtily asked, "Does he really think that after reading the book he will learn swordsmanship?" The blonde brother holding his wooden sword in his hand said that the Jin was nothing and he was not worthy of a chance, explaining that if they are given a chance, they forget their place and cling to hope. He asked why his brother did this. Then one of them grabbed Jin by the hair and told him that he was only doing it for his own good. Then one of them asked if this was what his nanny taught him. Jin said it wasn't Gilly's fault. His brothers again reproached him for contradicting them and decided to teach him manners. Brothers, a complete lack of talent. All Jin knew was that he needed to keep training. He believed that only by training hard would he gain the recognition of his family, and that he would eventually be recognized as a Rangendal. Jin was banished from the castle. From now on, he is no longer part of the family. He was kept alive on the grounds that they had taken his efforts into account. So for 25 years, he was exiled from his family and doomed to a miserable existence. But then he met the master and realized that he had a talent. And not just a talent, but a talent for magic, which is forbidden in his family. Then the story is moved forward 3 years, and we see Jin trying to replenish his mana by combining it with natural mana. But suddenly, a black aura envelops him. Jin is at a loss as to what happened. Suddenly, a cloud of dark aura appears behind him. Jin asked him who he was. Clot replied that his name was Solderit and he was the Lord of Shadows. Our hero also introduced himself by giving his name. The Shadow Lord then offered Jin a contract. Jin was shocked. Solderit promised him that if Jin agreed, he would gain more than just shadow control, but it can also remove any curse. With the help of the shadows, Solderit discovered that Jin had been greatly hated as a child, and that apparently his talents are sealed by a curse. This curse is called the Blade Illusion and it suppresses your swordsmanship abilities. Such a terrible curse could not have fallen on one of the Rankendellas. That's what attracted the Shadow Lord. He stated that from now on, Jin would not be affected by any curse. The Shadow Lord said that he would enjoy watching Jin become an outstanding mage. The magic dissipated and Jin went outside to test his swordsmanship skills. Drawing his sword from his belt, he lunged. Jin was surprised that Solderit was telling the truth. Now holding the sword in his hands, Jin felt how light it was, like a feather. While swinging his sword, Jin tried to add some magic. Thus, he was able to combine sword and magic. And now the worst swordsman in Rankendal history doesn't exist. Jin exclaimed enthusiastically that he was finally buying it. Suddenly, 3 knights who have been watching Jin all this time appear from behind the bushes. Suddenly, Jin opens his eyes and hears screams. Covered in rocks and covered in blood, he can't move. His body felt so heavy. He keeps hearing screams. When he suddenly remembers, they begin to call out to the master and Solderit, even though he is near death. Jin can't believe he died in his sleep. He gets obsessive thoughts that he is a non-entity. He regrets that he just got the chance to combine magic with the power of Solderit. In desperation, he only asks if it really had to end like this. And if so, why was he even given the chance? Then we see Jin being transported back to her childhood. He is surrounded by men from his family. Jin wonders what's going on. He knows he's dead and can't believe what's happening. The girl turns to him and tells him not to hang up his nose. Jin recognizes the same nanny Jilly. Looking at the space around him, he sees a field littered with swords and recognizes the same sword. The sword of Barisan. Suddenly, Jin realizes that he's at the selection ceremony. He went back in time. He is only 1 year old now. Everyone who was at the ceremony was surprised that Jin chose the sword of the family head in his previous life. He chose this sword by pure chance. But in this one, he decided to make that choice himself. Jin made up his mind and chose the Barasada sword. The group of people were shocked and couldn't believe their eyes. His relatives knew that this sword was the sword of the head of the family, and we see that the head of the family himself says that his youngest son chose the Barasada. With that, the selection ceremony was over, and the order was given. Jin must be taken to the Castle of the Storm. We have a view of the Tempest Castle. It looks really grand and even lives up to its name. A hand tries to reach the book. We can see that it's Jin. After failing to pick up the book, he picks up a chair to reach out. In parallel, he says that it has already been 6 years since he was sent here. According to the family's rules, Jin will stay in the castle until he is 10 years old. This means that he will stay in the castle for another 3 years. But as we can see, this does not please him. Suddenly, shouts are heard from somewhere. When asked what happened, a shocked maid sitting on the floor says to the main character, "There's a dead bird in his room." Seeing this, Jin says that only the castle can do such a thing. When his twin brothers suddenly step in and say, "Oh, look." From their facial expressions, it immediately becomes clear that it was they who killed the poor bird. One of these brothers is called Daytona Rankendel. He is 9 years old and the 11th of the 13 sons of Rankendel. The second one is called Hayton Rankendel. He is also 9 years old. He is the 12th of Rankendel's 13 sons. They sarcastically asked Jin if he liked the gift, but Jin didn't say anything. Jin only thought that he knew what kind of killers they would grow up to be. They're only 9 now and they've already killed a defenseless bird, just to torment Jin. Hayton tells Jin that he's annoyed with him, but Jin still doesn't say anything. Then they ask him about the fact that the future head of the family really does not put them in anything, and they joke about where his Barasada is. Jin said something, but Hayton didn't hear him, so he started teasing him. He told Jin to repeat it. Jin fell silent again. Then Hayton grabbed him by the shoulder. I almost hit him, but Jin blocked the kick just in time. Hayton was at a loss. Jin told Hayton to shut up. Jin was giving off dark energy. Jin then slapped his brother. Hayton, in turn, was outraged and exclaimed about how Jin dares to beat him. Then Jin hit him again. This time, the impact was even stronger. With the words that Jin had endured for a long time, he prepared for the next blow, and a mysterious dark energy was still coming from him. Jin punched Hayton again, this time in the stomach. The room was noisy. Jin said that from now on, it was best for his brothers to stay out of his sight. Just then, a man with a red cloak came to the noise. He saw that the twin brothers were lying unconscious and Jin was standing next to them. This person asked about what had happened here, turning to the young masters. Then Jin, still emitting dark energy from his hand, said the man's name. His name was Han. Han turned to Jin and asked him what he had done. The young master lied to the Khan, saying that the twin brothers had fought with each other. Han didn't believe the young master and asked again. Jin then gave Han a cold look and said that they had fought and then plummeted. Han had expected nothing less from the Rankendel. Even children were merciless, he thought. And with Hayton in his hands, he didn't argue with Jin and only accepted his lie. Han was about to take the brothers to the doctor, but Jin interrupted him and said that they didn't need to see a doctor right now. He motioned for Han to follow him. It was raining outside at this time and the weather was not the most pleasant. We see Jin just finished burying the very bird that his brothers killed. He was leaning slightly over the bird's burial site. He buried the bird under a tree, and there were 2 brothers lying unconscious. It was raining outside, and Han asked the young master if he really wanted to drop the twins right there. Han noticed that the rain continued to increase. Jin just said what they needed. Remembering again what they had done, he continued. Turning to Han with a cold look, he said that they needed to think about their behavior. Han had no choice but to obey the master's order. Jin went to the castle. He left his brothers in the mud in the rain. But I didn't feel for a second that I'd done anything wrong. Han just stared at Jin from behind him. Suddenly, he felt a strange power. It came from the boy. Han was confused because Jin's power is not like an aura. Han took a closer look at Jin's hand, which was emitting dark energy. He couldn't believe it was magic. If Han was right, then they had bigger problems than their brothers' quarrels. He must report to the head about what happened and that Jin has magic. Then the Khan called out to a passing servant. He ordered him to saddle his horse. Meanwhile, Jin was already in the castle. He watched Han from the window. Jin immediately knew that Han wanted to report everything to his father. Han wasn't just their security guard, but also the one who kept an eye on them. Jin realized that since he thought the boy had magic, he wasn't going to give up so easily. Dark energy radiated from Jin's hand. It turns out that this is the energy of shadows. It is proof of his contract with Solderlaw, the Shadow Lord. With this power, Jin realized that even death didn't break their contract. In this life, thanks to this power, he was immune to curses. In particular, the curse that was on him in his previous life, namely the Blade Illusion curse. Thanks to this, there was no longer a worse person in this life. The swordsman in the family's history, as he was called in his previous life. Jin was determined that a lot of things would be different from what they were in his previous life. Then Jin decided that he needed to do something, namely, meet your father. Meanwhile, Han had already finished reporting to his father about what had happened. He was kneeling on one knee. The father is clearly not happy with this course of events and did not comment on what happened, only repeated the words of Khan that the younger one beat up the twins. After that, my father turned to the Khan. He told him to gather the standard bearers. The father is going to the youngest. After bowing to his father, one of the bannermen announced that all 7 bannermen and 200 knights were ready. And then we see all the members of the standard bearers. Among them is a white-haired girl. The same guy who reported you were ready. A smiling girl with black hair and a guy next to her. The next shot shows us 3 more flag bearers. After gathering all the bannermen and knights, my father headed for Tempest Castle. Here we see for the first time what it looks like. He's dressed all in black, has ashen hair, and looks menacing. We see the Rankindle coat of arms wriggling in the wind, a woman's voice saying that everyone was gathered so suddenly. We see that it is a girl, one of the flag bearers. She asks Def, calling him little brother, if he knows why. She says she's already asked Luna, but she doesn't seem to know either. This Devuka is Mary Rankindle, the 7th standard bearer of the Rankindles. Yawning, she says that she is not up to it and that she needs to beat the magicians. Next to her stands Deeth Rankindle, the 4th standard bearer of the Rankindles. He thinks out loud and says that the twins are only a year old and that they are hardly the problem. Then he answered Marie's question. He said that the father went to see the younger one. Marie asked in surprise why he went to see the younger one. Deeth reminded her that Jin had chosen the family head sword at the selection ceremony. She wondered if this was the only Priscilla, but she immediately responded by saying that they couldn't understand what was on their father's mind. Then one of the flag bearers called out to Marie and Deeth. She motioned for them to keep their voices down. This girl's name is Luna Rankindle, and she is the first of the Rankindle bannermen. Marie suddenly wondered why her father had decided to check on her younger brother in person. The only thing that occurred to her was that he was really special. Meanwhile, the nanny straightens the young master's shirt and tells him that the head is coming to visit them. She suggested that maybe the father wanted to see the children. At the same time, Jin thinks that Han must have told his father everything. Jin thinks Han is... He would never say it directly. Jin believes that Han probably just described everything he saw. While the nanny was brushing his hair, all he could think about was what was going on. He assumed that Han had described his power as something that was neither aura nor magic. My father was definitely interested in figuring out what it was. He wanted to see if this power of Jin could contribute to the greatness and prosperity of the family. Meanwhile, the castle gates opened, and the knights came in, their swords pointed at the sky. The knights wore iron shoulder pads and helmets that protected their heads. Then a voice greeted my father, who was the first to enter the castle. And here is the very sword of the head of the family Barasada. My father ordered the twins to be brought in. The twins were kneeling on one knee in front of their father. Their father asked them about their fight with Jin, and he asked them to tell him what their fault was. The twins stiffened at the question and were somewhat confused, but they quickly found a way out of the situation. They said it wasn't their fault, and Jin attacked them first. They put all the blame on him. Once again, they reminded their father that he had defeated them with his unknown power, which is not like an aura, more like magic. And then the twins, pleased with themselves, said that magic is forbidden in their family. Neri, who was standing in the room, confirmed that magic was forbidden and was about to start talking about questioning Jin when her father interrupted her. He turned to his sons and told them to remember that they would not survive in the Rankindle family like this. The twins were only startled and silently headed for the exit, and my father ordered me to bring Jin in. His father's name was Shiren Rankindle. He is the strongest and most indifferent person in the world. He is the greatest hero of the time, a demigod, the quintessential knight. After becoming a knight instead of a mere human, he lost most of his emotions. Now, he is only obsessed with the clan and its development. For Shiren, someone without a talent for swordsmanship is just an empty space. So it was in the past, when Jin was cursed. But now it's different. After collecting his thoughts, Jin was firmly convinced that everything would change in this lifetime. He will make everyone respect him. He headed for the entrance. He opened the gate and all eyes were on him. As soon as he took a step and entered, he immediately got down on one knee. He greeted his father, calling him master. Shiren asked him why Jin called him master instead of father, to which Jin argued that his brothers, sisters, and knights were here. Several hundred people. That's why he decided it was an official visit. He chose what he considered appropriate treatment. Luna was surprised by Jin's answer and admitted that it was very comprehensive. After finishing his answer, Jin thanked him and called him master again. Shiren told the boy that he was in the castle today for a different reason, so the boy can call him father. Shiren decided to ask Jin the same question he had asked the twins. He asked about what prompted Jin to do this. Jin clenched his fist and said, "It was just revenge." He said that every Rangandal should give what they deserve. Marie was surprised by his words. Jin continued by saying that it didn't matter if they did him good or evil. Shiren said nothing. He ordered Jin to stay and everyone else to come out. The knights began to discuss the situation, They talked about whether the junior was able to pass the head test. One of the flag bearers told them not to stand around and follow orders. The knights obeyed. Everyone headed for the exit. Before she left, Marie turned around and said with a smile that a conversation with her father alone was pretty good for such a small child. As soon as everyone left, Cheyenne said that he would like to ask Jin a few questions in person. According to the twins, Jin has some special power. Jin tried to hide it and started talking about how Rankindles aren't allowed to use magic. After all, then you cannot fully focus on fencing and reach the top of your skill. But Cheyenne was insistent and once again asked the boy what this power was. He said that if it was magic, he wouldn't just let it go. Jin started to answer, thinking that as long as his father knew about his powers, he wouldn't let go. The boy himself wondered what kind of power it was, the power of Solderit. Jin said that he doesn't know what it is, maybe magic, or maybe aura. It began to emit shadow energy. He himself was wondering what such a power was called, so he created a bundle of dark energy to demonstrate it to his father. He asked his father to help him figure it out. Seeing this, my father suddenly realized what kind of power it was. This is the power of the founder of the Rangandal family. By taking a look at this, the father realized that the boy has the energy of shadows, the same energy that the Barasada has. My father came to the conclusion that he was indeed destined to lead the family. The boy, holding a ball of shadow energy, turned to his father. My father spoke. He said that Jin had the power of Soderith, the god of shadows. Jin asked his father if it was really the power of the shadow god. My father confirmed it. My father told me that Solderit had made a contract with Lord Temer, the founder of the Rankandal family. Solderit has since become the patron saint of the family. However, since Temer's death, the shadow god was never seen again. My father couldn't explain why Solderit had decided that, but it looked like Solderit was trying to contact the Rankandal through Jin. Then the boy said that he wanted to ask his father something. He asked his father about the shadow god, why Solderit is stronger than Cheyenne. My father turned his back and pondered. He said he didn't know, and that he had never had to fight a god before. Jin pondered the answer, puzzled. Looking at Cheyenne's smiling face, he couldn't think of a better answer. My father turned to Jin. He called him son and his hand started moving closer to Jin's head. Jin was startled. He thought something was going to happen, but Cheyenne placed his hand on his son's head and praised him. He told him it was good to ask. His innocent question gave Cheyenne a great topic of conversation. Cheyenne said that seeing Jin was the right thing to do. He added that he also wanted to ask a question. He wondered what Jin would do with her power. Jin put his hand to his heart and said that he was going to use it for the good of the family. Then the father looked at the boy with disapproval and muttered his own words that he would use the force for the good of the family. After that, a smile appeared on his stubbly face, and he exclaimed loudly that the Jin made him laugh. Jin didn't understand what was going on. He stood silently in front of his father. Jin's father told him that he beat up his brothers. I put them outside in a thunderstorm, and I asked him how he dares to say that the power is for the good of his family. Jin stood silently with his head bowed. My father told me to tell Jin not to lie to him. Jin knew that his father wouldn't just forget about it. Jin was trembling, but he still found the courage and determination to respond. He said that he uses his power to achieve his goals. His father frowned again and looked at Jin in silence. When suddenly he said that he liked this answer. Jin was surprised that such an answer suited his father. Cheyenne headed for the exit. As he passed Jin, he said that he would keep an eye on him. Cheyenne walked out, but Jin was still standing in the same spot. Once the door closed, Jin could no longer contain his emotions. He was really scared. Panting, he was glad he'd gotten away with it. He was also glad that he was able to find out what this shadow energy was and that it was justified. He couldn't have expected his father to be interested. A moment from his previous life popped up in his mind. A moment where he was standing broken behind his father, who didn't even pay attention to him. But this life is the exact opposite of the last one. Clenching his fist, Jin thought with a smile on his face. Jin and his nanny were taking a walk in the Tempest Castle. Suddenly, someone called out to him. It was Marie, and she handed him the box. He asked his little sister what it was. She said it was a special gift from her big sister. She gave it to the babysitter, saying it was heavy. What was in that box Jin didn't know and couldn't guess. Marie told him to cook it well, to chew it thoroughly, and she wished him to grow up big and strong. Deef asked Marie where her suitcase was. She said she gave it to Junior. Hearing this, Jin wondered why she had given it to him. Jin opened the suitcase. When he opened it, the nanny was shocked. Orange energy radiated from the box. He saw that there was something that looked like a heart and a strange energy was coming from it. It turned out to be the heart of a phoenix, and Jin could tell that he was confused. To give something like this to a child, you have to be crazy. Marie Rankandal, Knight of the 6th rank, 7th standard bearer of the Rankandals. They called her Raging Wind. She has another nickname, but few people know about it. It is also called the Fury of the Southern Lands. Obviously, the battle-mad sister had given Jin such a gift. Her wishes for him to grow big and strong were not empty words. She wanted him to fight her. Jin was sitting at the table. He reasoned that if you eat the phoenix heart at such a young age, you can not only get resistance to fire, but also grow faster. He also remembered that a 6th-ranked mage needed the phoenix heart to safely summon it. He had already imagined that he might even be able to summon a phoenix in this lifetime. Meanwhile, the nanny came over with a plate in her hands. She set the plate down on the table, and I noticed that Lady Marie had given Jin such a lovely present. She asked Jin to start eating while the dish was still warm. Jin was about to start, but there were 2 brothers standing behind him. They looked like they were hungry, too. He asked them not to delay and directly say what they want. They didn't show any sign of insinuating that they had cooked too much, that Jin couldn't handle the whole pot alone. Jin asked them if they really wanted it and they immediately started nodding. Then Jin decided to give them something to do. The 2 brothers went to the mine and dug. Of course, they weren't happy that they were doing this. They thought, why should they? We wondered what the point of all this was. They were afraid that they would get in trouble for digging around here. The second brother said that if something happens, the younger one will answer. Forgetting about all the inconveniences for the sake of soup, they continued to dig. Suddenly it turned out that the mine they were digging was directly above a certain room. Suddenly we see that a person is in a cell that is filled with water. It is immediately clear that it is well protected. We can see what kind of person he is. It gives off a dark aura that resembles the energy of shadows. Seeing his face, it becomes clear that he is unconscious and most likely he was imprisoned in such a place. The twins did return. They had completed Jin's errand. The nanny was at a loss as to what they were doing. Upon their return, Jin congratulated them and said that they had done it quickly. The 2 brothers were disheveled and their clothes were covered in mud. They were standing with a shovel, pickaxe, and lantern. One of them said that they had completed Jin's errand and were entitled to soup. Then Jin, who was wearing a raincoat, said that the soup was already waiting for them on the table. Daytona was glad to hear that. When they saw 2 spoons with some soup in them, the only thing they could say was to ask where. Then they turned to Jin and called him little brother. They were not happy with the fact that there is only a teaspoon and does not seem to him that this is not enough. Jin replied that he said he would give you some soup, but didn't say how much. After that, he rhetorically asked if he kept his promise, and then wished him a good appetite. The brothers sarcastically thanked him, clearly displeased. Then the action takes place in the forest, among the trees. Jin took off his hood. He seems to have noticed something. It turns out that Jin came to the same mine where the twins were digging. He had given them an assignment to dig a mine for a bit and didn't expect them to try so hard. After knocking on the wall, Jin determined that a 1st-rank spell would be enough to break through such a wall. After that, Jin created a green ball in his hands and a green-colored magic aura appeared around it. He said that he was almost upset that he didn't have anywhere to throw his magic. He leaned his hands against the wall. A round magic rune appeared. Rocks flew in all directions. Jin managed to break through the wall. He said that he was finally in his seats. It turned out that he got into the secret storage of the rank candle. Looking at the sealed gate, he thought that in his previous life, he never got here, so now he feels somewhat awkward. He stood in front of the gate and thought about what his older brother had told him, namely the code phrase needed to open the gate. Suddenly, Jin thought of something and smiled. Jin, standing in front of the door, said that the Rangandal child wanted to comfort Murakin. That was the secret code. The door began to move. It opened and Jin entered the vault. This vault holds the secrets of the families that the Rangandal have destroyed over the past millennium. This storage was really huge. Only the Rangandal bannerman could enter this vault. In his previous life, Jin's brother had said that he didn't need to know about this place since he wouldn't be the standard bearer anyway. Even so, his brother helped Jin. Remembering this, Jin decided that now he would find a use for his knowledge. Suddenly, Jin saw a strange dark aura. He didn't understand what it was. When he got a better look, he saw that there was a human inside the cell, but then he saw that he had scales on his face and realized that he wasn't a human. At first, he thought about where this creature came from, but suddenly he realized something very important. In the same code phrase, the name Murakin is pronounced. Jin guessed that the creature behind the glass was Murakin. Jin wondered if this was the Black Dragon Murakin. It is said that the first standard bearer defeated the Black Dragon and sent him into a deep sleep. Up until this point, Jin hadn't believed in legends. He thought they were just fairy tales. Jin stood looking at Murakin for a moment longer. Then he came to his senses and his priority was the books he was looking for. Jin continued to search for books. Suddenly Murakin, who had been sleeping for centuries, moved his finger. Jin found the book he was looking for. He was standing in front of a bookshelf and he said that it contained the secrets of various families. Deciding to start with the Kunjin family, who were also swordsmen, he picked up the book. As he read, he realized that the theory was too complicated for third-rank magic. Jin wanted to take all the books with him, but then he might be caught with the books, especially since there was nowhere to hide them. Then he found a way out of the situation. He decided that he would come and copy books. He came back from the vault and read the book copied from there as if nothing had happened, but no one could suspect him. The next day, he also sat and copied the book in the vault. Suddenly, he heard strange noises. He was scared, so he got up from the table and put things off for later. Jin asked who was there. He couldn't believe that someone would come here from Tempest Castle at this hour. Suddenly the doors opened and the man turned to Jin and asked who he was. Jin was shocked. He recognized Muraken. He couldn't understand why Muraken had awakened. Jin couldn't remember ever hearing about his awakening in his previous life. At the same time, Muraken stared at the boy in silence. There were scales on his face, and his eye was like a snake's and glowed yellow. Jin stood there in fear. He tried to reassure himself that Muraken the dragon was the Rankindle family's guardian and that if Jin showed respect, he would spare the child. Jin introduced himself. He said he was a Rankindle child, and that he welcomes the guardian of the family. Hearing this, Muraken's face changed. His veins bulged even on his forehead. Suddenly, he started shouting and asking Jin what he called him. Muraken asked Jin again if he had called him a guardian. He was very angry and shouted so loudly that Jin covered his ears with his hands. Muraken also indignantly said how dare Jin treat him like a servant. He started cursing Rankindle. He was shouting about what Rankindle had told the descendants that he was now considered a guardian. He said he wouldn't take it out on the small stuff, but he's furious. But come to think of it, he'd already snapped at Gina. Then Muraken calmed down, crouching down and repeating the word devil several times. He took a deep breath in and out, then said he'd been locked up for a while. Just woke up and sees the baby. Jin stood in front of Muraken, puzzled, and didn't understand anything. When Muraken suddenly leaned over the boy and tried to smell something, he asked why Jin smelled like shadow energy. Muraken said that even though he had slept for 1,000 years, he definitely hadn't forgotten the smell. According to him, only those who sign a contract with Solderit smell like Temer, the founder of Rankindles, once did. Suddenly, the boy understood why Muraken had awakened. It turned out that it was all because of his strength. Meanwhile, Muraken was trying to smell where the shadow energy was coming from. Then Jin decided that it was time to try something. He turned to Mr. Muraken. Muraken asked him what the boy knew about shadow energy. Back then, Jin personally demonstrated his mastery of shadow energy. Jin said that according to his father, the god of shadows gave the boy his power. This clearly didn't please Muraken. A drop of sweat rolled down his forehead, and he couldn't believe what he was seeing, hoping it was Solderit's joke. He was very upset that the one he had been waiting for 1,000 years was just a child. As a result, there was an awkward pause between them. The two of them stood in silence, looking at each other. Muraken was on his knees, exhausted, and turned to Jin. He told him a story about how he had once made a promise to Solderit, and it looked like Muraken would have to team up with Jin to fulfill that promise. Jin started to ask Muraken something about his promise to Solderit, but Muraken cut him off. He said that he would explain everything later because he had just woken up and wasn't thinking straight yet. And I don't think Jin will understand. But at least he wanted to introduce himself properly to Solderit's follower. Shadow energy appeared around Muraken. Jin was shocked at how much shadow energy Muraken was using. Muraken introduced himself and said that he was a representative of Solderit. His hand was shrouded in shadow energy and there were claws where his fingers should have been. Gradually his body was completely shrouded in this energy. Muraken also said that he is a friend of Solderit and the last descendant of the first creature created from the shadow. Muraken was completely different from his human form. His eyes glowed white, and he had wings instead of arms. Finally, he turned into a dragon, and a powerful shadow energy radiated from him. He said that according to the 1,000-year contract, from now on, he would serve Jin. Jin couldn't say a word, he just wondered if such a great being would serve him. Muraken, in the form of a dragon, asked Jin for his name. In response, Jin smiled and looked at Muraken. When he knocked off his fist, he revealed himself as Jin Rankindle, the 13th and youngest of the Rankindle family. The Black Dragon Muraken. Mount Muraken, a place with violent winds, is named after this dragon. Once upon a time, the Black Dragon Muraken ruled the lands of the Rankindle, but 1,000 years ago Temer slain Muraken. Bura Castle is said to have been destroyed as a result. Muraken fell into a deep sleep. Jin came out of the vault. He wasn't sure if the founder's guardian dragon was telling the truth. Anyone who makes a contract with a god must be paired with a guardian dragon. However, the guardian of Solderit didn't know anything about the dragon. Jin assumes it's all because of Muraken's hibernation. But now that he's awake, he's going to be a personal guardian, Jin thought. At the entrance to the vault, he indicated in advance that he had come. Muraken was glad to see the boy, more precisely, what he brought with him. Jin gave him a snack that the nanny had prepared for him. Jin said that since they would spend the next few days together, it is worth asking Muraken about everything that he is interested in. That's how Jin hid Muraken in the secret library for a long time. While Mirakan ate, Jin asked him questions, and once again Jin asked about the battle with Temur. Mirakan said he shouldn't remember because it was 1,000 years ago. Jin just stood there, not knowing what to say. Mirakan said he was sure of one thing, but before he finished, he asked for another strawberry pie. It turned out that the ancient black dragon liked strawberry pie. Mirakan asked Jin what he was doing here. Jin said he brought empty books and wrote down everything Mirakan said. He was surprised and asked if Jin understood anything at all. Only 30%, Jin said. Mirakan told him not to lose heart and complimented him on how good it was for his age. Other children are not capable of this and even lazy. Jin retorted that this was true for ordinary children, and he's a Rankendel and he can't afford it. He has 12 older brothers and sisters, and also mom, dad, grandparents, and if he wants to crush them, he'll have to try harder. Jin asked Mirakan how much of this book the founder himself would have understood. Jin thought about how he would look compared to the strongest man in history, how he could have proved himself. Mirakan replied that at Jin's age, he wouldn't have understood a single line. But theory is not always necessary. Mirakan said that even though Temur didn't read books, he still fought well. He added that Jin has the potential of Temur, but he is no match for him. It seems that Jin is very hurt by this. He asked Mirakan if this meant that he would never leave the family. After a brief pause, Mirakan replied that he wasn't. He said that once Jin signed a contract with Solderit, so did Temur. And read something so complex. Putting his hand on Jin's head, he said that Jin was still young. He needs to be patient and train more, and then he will be as strong as Temur. Mirakan said that Jin might even be able to surpass him. Then, when Jin asked if he really believes there, Mirakan replied that this is indeed the case. And he said that Solderit had a nickname for infinity. Solderit's power is limitless, so he's like a follower, too. So he told Jin to keep his head down and believe in himself. So Mirakan decided to teach Jin a secret technique to lighten his mood a little. Mirakan placed his palm on Jin's back and released some energy. The boy was in pain and asked what kind of technique it was. Mirakan said that this is a technique for releasing shadow energy. It was the first time Jin had ever heard of such a technique, which wasn't surprising since he wasn't experienced in using shadow magic yet. According to Mirakan, this technique should be able to be done by anyone who is connected with shadow magic. Beginnings and endings of shadow energy subjugation training. But Mirakan warned that if the boy did not master everything, it could be dangerous. So they will learn carefully and gradually. Interested, the boy accepted the terms and immediately asked where to start. Mirakan said that first you need to learn how to unleash mana. Jin asked why it was necessary, but at the same time, he remembered that he often did this in his previous life. Mirakan explained that releasing shadow energy is opening and moving the flow of mana. To do this, you need to have perfect mana control. He said they would be doing it for the next 2 or 3 years. Jin then thought that it was too long. Mirakan smiled and looked away, saying that you can't learn something advanced without knowing the basics. So once they learn how to move their mana, they'll start learning how to move it. Meanwhile, Jin had already revealed his mana. Holding the magic sphere in his hands, he asked Mirakan what to do next. As soon as Mirakan saw this, he was shocked. How did he do it? Asked Mirakan. It turned out that Jin has been able to do this for a long time. Mirakan said that he couldn't believe his eyes, so he asked Jin if he wanted to learn how to move mana. But Jin, as if nothing had happened, immediately moved the mana sphere from one hand to the other. Mirakan was pleasantly surprised by this. He said that only the greatest geniuses are capable of such a thing. Since the boy had all the basics, Mirakan had no choice but to show what the release of shadow energy looked like. Mirakan explained that the energy of shadows is drawn, oddly enough, from shadows. Solderit created all the shadows in the world. Meanwhile, we see that the shadows around Mirakan begin to distort and seem to reach out to him. That is why, Mirakan continued, Solderit is the lord of all the shadows of the world, and Jin is his follower. Suddenly, shadows began to move across the floor. Shadows from all objects suddenly came to life and gathered in one place under Mirakan's feet. Mirakan said that Jin could also become a shadow lord. He turned to the boy and asked him what he thought about it. This was the release of shadow energy. Jin's face was ecstatic. At the same time, a battle took place somewhere in the forest. Lady Luna stood with a sword in her hands over the monster she had defeated. A knight turned to her and informed her that everything was clear on their territory. There are 5 areas left to be cleaned up, which you need to deal with in order to complete the task. According to Luna, 4 months is enough for them, and now the knights can rest. With a look full of sadness, she was standing on a battlefield. She swung her sword, shaking off the blood on it, and wondered if this was something that 9-year-olds liked. The corpses of various creatures were scattered around her. Half a year after Jin met Mirakan, the twins left the Tempest Castle. The twins said that they would see each other again, and Jin wished them to take care of themselves. And so the twins got into the carriage and drove away. Meanwhile, Jin has already turned 9 years old. His nanny Gilly wished him a happy birthday and gave him a cake. Jin thanked the nanny and asked her to give everyone a piece. Then, all of a sudden, Han came into the room. Han apologized for interrupting. Jin asked him what had happened. Jin started talking as Luna was already entering the castle. Han informed Jin that Lady Luna had arrived at the castle. Jin and the nanny were surprised by Luna's visit. Luna was the first standard bearer of the rank candle and a knight of the 9th rank. She was the firstborn of the head of the family. The nickname White Whale has been established for her. Even though Luna was stronger than her siblings, she wasn't interested in a power struggle. She's not involved in a dirty war for the throne, so she's really like a lone white whale. That's why Luna never cared about other children. In a previous life, Jin and Luna didn't even seem to be a family. They were so far apart. That's why her visit surprised Jin so much. At first, Jin thought something terrible had happened. He then assumed that she had somehow found out that he was in the secret library, and so they met each other. Luna's first sentence was just that Jin had grown up. Jin thought it was an official visit, so he told Luna that if he had known she was coming, he would have dressed appropriately. Luna, in turn, only said that he was cute. And did she really need to notify everyone in order to see her younger brother? Jin was confused and didn't understand what was going on. Luna took him by the shoulders and asked if he was ill because he didn't look well. Jin replied that he wasn't sick, but just a little nervous. Suddenly Luna was lost in thought. Jin said it's the first time he's seen her up close. That's why he's on edge. Suddenly Luna thought about his words. She thought Jin thought she was trying to follow him or something. Because it's normal in the rank candle family to follow relatives, steal from them, trample them in the mud. Suddenly Luna became nervous and after a short pause hesitantly said that she had behaved disrespectfully. Jin was surprised and asked her again. Then Luna said that Jin might be Mal, but she shouldn't have forgotten that he was rank candle after all. Then she lowered her eyes and apologized to Jin. She got down on one knee and called Jin baby and said to him. She wanted to talk to him in private and asked him if Nanny and the knights could leave them for a while. Jin was surprised that she wanted to talk to him alone. He replied that he would also like to talk, but he still didn't understand what she wanted, but he assumed it was nothing bad. Jin, little brother Luna said. She wanted to tell him something. That was the reason why she came without an invitation. Jin is interested and asks what it is. Luna said that when his father visited him, his behavior attracted all the siblings. Then she took his hand gently and told him that it meant that once he left the Castle of Storm they would be watching him closely. Luna was clearly worried about her brother's fate and said something else to him. She hoped that he could live happily ever after without getting involved in a family conflict. Luna really didn't want Jin to be harmed by the Rankendel family's customs. After saying that, Jin realized why Luna had decided to visit him. It turns out that my sister came out of the war for the throne. Jin then wondered why she didn't tell him about it in her previous life if she didn't want him to get involved in the war for the throne. There were two possible reasons why this happened. Perhaps it was because he was unworthy to even speak to her. Or maybe in her previous life, she didn't warn him because no one even saw him as a rival. Jin put his hand on Luna's wrist and said that he was really grateful to her, but he really wasn't going to get knocked out of the game. Then Luna tried to change his mind by saying that she really wasn't joking and that she wasn't talking to him because she thought he would become her competitor. Jin let it be known that he knew it was serious, but there was already an attempt on his life. By assassination, he meant that he had a curse on him and his death in a previous life. Suddenly Luna's face changed abruptly and she asked Jin what he was talking about. Jin said that because of this, there is no turning back. Suddenly, a dark purple aura began to emanate from the moon and she asked Jin who dared to do this. Angered, she asked again about who had dared to attack him in the Tempest Castle. The entire room and even the cup on the table began to shake from the aura of the moon. Jin looked up at the moon. At that moment, he saw a different moon from the one that had communicated with him a moment ago. Her eyes were filled with anger, and she was ready to kill the one who dared to attack Jin. She asked Jin a few more times who wanted to kill him, but Jin chose to hide it by saying that it was classified information. Then he clarified that he didn't really know who it was, but even though he was attacked, he's fine right now. Thanks to Luna's reaction, Jin realized that not all of his relatives hated him, and he was glad to see that they didn't. Suddenly, Luna, full of sadness, hugged Jin. It turns out that Jin has already been dragged into this vile conflict, Luna said. It saddened her. In his previous life, Jin wouldn't have thought that Luna was so kind and empathetic. Luna changed the subject and said that today is a holiday and you should not talk about sad things. It's Jin's birthday, after all. Luna came to congratulate him, and with that, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something. She took out the box and presented it to her brother. In this box, there was a pendant with a blue stone in the center. She asked Jin to turn his back for a second while holding the pendant, and after putting the pendant on him she said that if he was in a desperate situation he would have to break the blue stone. And when he breaks it, she will come to his aid wherever she is. So she asked Jin to never take off this pendant. Luna leaned a little closer to Jin, a smile on her face, and wished him a happy birthday. Everyone was sitting at the table drinking tea, and the nanny had brought strawberry shortcake. Luna even managed to spoon-feed Jin like a small child, so it made Jin uncomfortable. Meanwhile, his nanny stood there and watched with a smile as Luna loved her little brother. After all this, Luna said goodbye and said that it was time for her to go. Jin told her to take care of herself and waved goodbye to her as well, now wearing a pendant with a large blue stone. Jin came to Murakan. Judging by the way he greeted him and waited for Jin. Murakan didn't really have time to say anything before he noticed what was on Jin's neck. When asked what was on his neck, Jin said it was a birthday present. Then Murakan told Jin that the person who gave it to him seems to love him very much. Judging from Murakan's reaction, this pendant was special. Jin asked Murakan what it was. This pendant is an artifact of the demon king Orgel. Murakan told the story that 1,000 years ago, people risked their lives just to get one of his artifacts. Is this pendant really that amazing? Asked Jin. Murakan replied that this pendant gives the wearer resistance to attacking magic no higher than rank 5 and also increases their magic power. And it is possible that it has the ability to summon. Murakan knew a lot about the pendant because he was living in that period. He said that there was a person with very strong energy here and assumed that the gift was from him. Jin said it was a gift from his older sister and asked if he could sense her energy even from here. Murakan actually sensed her energy even from the secret vault, but more than that, he said that she also noticed his energy. Jin was afraid of that. He asked Murakan if she would tell anyone about it. Murakan said that there was no reason to worry since she had given him something so precious after all and pointed to the pendant. He asked if Jin thought she would turn on her brother and leave him to die. He assured Jin that he could trust her, and yet, it turns out that the moon actually felt Murakan's energy. On the way out of the Tempest Castle, she said that there was a strong energy coming from here that wasn't there before. But she wasn't hostile, quite the opposite. She is ready to pretend that she doesn't know anything even if her brother is up to something. Jin, in turn, should always remember that no matter how much he grows up, she will always be on his side. Jin thought that life at Tempest Castle would be incredibly boring. But it brought him a lot of things: father's recognition and hopes, Phoenix heart from Sister Marie, friendship with the moon, and even getting to know the dragon guardian Murakan. This was something Jin had never dreamed of in his previous life. Jin is doing really well right now because he's only 10 years old. The action takes place in a room with a lot of weapons. In it, Jin fights with a man who punches him, but the teacher blocks him. It turns out that this is part of his preparation for moving to the central castle. The man hits him back, but Jin manages to block it. Jin lunges again and lands a powerful punch, but the man blocks it again. This man did not expect any other. After fighting with Jin, he understood why the master himself was interested in him. When this man was training others, he was judging their abilities, but judging by the look in his eyes, it was Jin who was judging whether he was fit to be a teacher. And so their duel ended. This man is Jin's teacher. He said that she had enough today. Then the teacher turned to Jin and asked if there was anything that didn't suit him during the training session. The man bowed and said that it was an honor to teach Jin. He added that it wasn't long before Jin left the castle, and the teacher promised him that he would do his best to prepare him in the best possible way. Jin just smiled and said that he would rely on the teacher. After practice, Jin held a candle in his hands and looked at it with interest. He stuck his finger right into the flame. Suddenly, he exclaimed that he had finally succeeded. The nanny who saw this was worried that he might have been burned. Gina turned to the nanny and said that now for him fire is like warm water. The nanny giggled and said she was glad Lady Marie's gift was working. She had only heard of the Phoenix Heart but had never seen its effects in person, and neither had Jin. Jin got this ability because he ate half of the Phoenix Heart and he planned to eat the other half in a couple of years. Meanwhile, his nanny was already packing up her things and informed him that they were leaving the castle at dawn. When she saw 2 books lying on the table, she asked him if he should take them with him on the journey. Jin said yes, he would read them on the way. The nanny asked him if he could take anything else, to which Jin said no. After packing up his things, she told him that she would also make him a strawberry pie. Jin said that he would like to have a pie and suddenly jumped up and remembered something. He said he'd take a little walk. Jin went to the secret vault and met Murakan there. He told Murakan that he was leaving tomorrow. Murakan said that he had been waiting for this day. But Jin wondered quite logically how he was going to take Murakan with him. In response, Murakan replied with a grin that he was a legendary black dragon and there was no need to panic. As a friend, Murakan started talking about how he was weak, but even that wouldn't stop him from going after Jin without anyone noticing. Jin asked Murakan why he hadn't said anything about being weak before. It was all because he had been asleep for 1,000 years. Jin asked if Murakan would be able to regain his strength, but he replied that they would become stronger together. After all, Murakan is his dragon guardian. So Mirakan told Jin that he was becoming a strong swordsman mage like Temur. Jin asked Mirakan about the fact that the Rankindle were originally both swordsmen and magicians. As a friend, he recalled what he had heard from Solderit in his previous life. Solderit had told him that their family were swordsmen and magicians. The founder of the Temur Runkindle family was the strongest swordsman mage in history. Apparently, at this time, everyone forgot about it. Suddenly Mirakan started talking about how Rankindelv had rejected magic and was only aiming for swordsmanship because of a humiliating contract made 1,000 years ago. Although Mirakan is revered as the guardian of the family, it is unlikely that anyone will be happy about his return. But if that had happened 1,000 years ago, he and Jin would have been honored for bringing back the world's noblest creature, Mirakan said. Jin asked Mirakan if he really thought so. Mirakan thought for a moment, then admitted that it sounded like nonsense, but whatever it was, he would hide well and asked Jin not to worry about it. Jin asked Mirakan what would happen if someone came to the vault and found him missing. Mirakan said that he would cast an illusion using dragon magic. Jin asked what would happen if the illusion was discovered. Mirakan got angry, grabbed Jin's head, and rhetorically asked Jin if he had forgotten that Mirakan was a shadow dragon. Mirakan said that for him to cast an illusion is a mere trifle, but since Mirakan has weakened, this illusion won't last long. But he promised that he would support her as long as he could until he regained his strength. Jin was about to leave and thanked Mirakan. Mirakan only pointed out that since Jin was grateful, he could have shown more respect. Jin suddenly remembered that he had something for Mirakan. He reached into his bag and pulled out a strawberry pie as well as the wine he'd stolen. Mirakan was very happy with this offering. After giving him the wine, Jin only asked him not to get drunk so as not to impose some strange illusion. Miraka couldn't contain his emotions and exclaimed that he had raised Jin for a reason, and also asked Jin to introduce him to his nanny. And now it was time to leave. Jin was warned by the nanny not to expect life to be as peaceful as it was inside the walls of Tempest Castle. Hajin may have trained hard at the castle, but now his life will be much more complicated and she won't be able to make him cake anymore. Jin told her not to worry and that he understood everything and would give it his all. The nanny bowed to him and said that she would also devote herself completely to him. Suddenly, someone came up to them and called out to the young master. It turned out to be the knights of the guard Jerome and Holtz. They greeted him. These two knights had to make sure that Jin arrived at the Garden of Swords in one piece. So Jin left the Tempest Castle. On this day, October 30th, 1790, Jin left Barry Castle. As I climbed into the carriage, he was only thinking that he was finally leaving this place. And so the horses started and the carriage drove off. Jin was really waiting to be sent to the Rankindle estate, to the Garden of Swords. Jin and his nanny were on their way to the Garden of Swords. It was snowing heavily outside. At this rate it's going to snow all the way and they'll have to wait it out in the nearest village, Jin said. The nanny said that if there was too much snow, they wouldn't be able to teleport. Suddenly, the carriage stopped abruptly. The knights outside reported that it was an ambush and asked them to stay in the carriage. The nanny hugged Jin and said that everything would be fine and asked him not to worry. Jerome and Holtz are 7th rank knights and Gilly is with him. From the sounds coming from outside, Gilly could tell that there were about 20 enemies out there. Among them are magic, war, and perhaps even archers. But there's hardly anyone above the 7th rank. Suddenly, Jin thought of something. He told Gilly to get out of the carriage at once. Gilly didn't understand and asked Jin what he was talking about. Jin said that the knights of the guard should not leave a Runnindle child unattended under any circumstances. One of the knights had to stay, Jin said, and suddenly Nanny understood too. This meant that at least one of these knights was a traitor or an imposter. Jin said that something might have been planted in the carriage, so they should leave. Gilly was angry and took the attack as a mistake. Suddenly, from behind the sleeves of Gilly's battle claws appeared. She said that she would protect Jin and asked him to forgive if he could not control himself. Gilly slammed her claws down hard, and the door shattered into splinters. The snow continued to fall outside. Gilly was carrying Jin in her arms. Running with him in her arms, she said that as soon as they arrived at the estate, she would accept the punishment she deserved. Jin said that he needed to go back to the knights because he wanted to make sure of something. When Gilly asked him what he wanted to make sure of, Jin said what kind of war their allies might have arranged. Jin supposed that if the attackers wanted him, they would have attacked him when he got off the carriage, but it was too quiet and suspicious. The nanny listened to Jin and decided to give him a chance to see for himself. When they arrived at the scene and saw a one-eyed, red-haired man shouting for his subordinates to find Jin Rankadel, Jin's guess was correct. There were two groups on the battlefield, one called Demon and the other called Black Sakura. One of the groups was a group of magicians from the Yuta family, which in turn was part of the Mytal family of magicians. The second group were the mercenaries from the Black King's squad. One of the mages spotted Jin's nanny, Gilly McLaurin, and Gina Ranchendel with her. Their main goal was to protect Jin Runkendel. Suddenly, the same red-haired, one-eyed man stepped in front of Jin and Gilly, blocking them out. He introduced himself. His name is Murika and he is the captain of the Black King's squad. He came here on the orders of the Rankandles to rescue Jin Runkandle. At the center of the battlefield were the two knights who had promised to bring Jin to the Garden of Swords in one piece. It turned out that they were the ones who dared to attack the young master. They were in a fighting stance and were ready to fight to the last. These two knights weren't traitors, they were imposters, as if they were truly 7th rank knights, they would have no problem dealing with everyone. The two knights were surrounded by the men from the Black King's squad and the mages from the Yuta family. The knights were desperate with despair. Suddenly Jilly screamed and asked who they were working for and what they needed. One of the knights said with a grin that it was an obvious question. Enraged, he said that he would not answer the Rankandle mutt. The nanny asked Jin what she should do. Jin coldly ordered her to kill one of the knights, then cut off the other's hands and bring them to him. Jilly obeyed the order. She made a sharp lunge towards the knight who had been rude to her. The last thing this knight saw was Gilly's menacing gaze, so she stabbed the knight in the throat and killed him. After finishing the first one, she started moving towards the second white-haired knight. The knight was terrified, but nevertheless prepared to defend himself. Before he knew it, Jilly had already stabbed him and he saw his own blood. She knocked him down and chopped off his arm. Then, she also mercilessly chopped off his other arm. The knight was terrified and screamed in pain. The seemingly fragile girl ruthlessly defeated her opponents while never doubting her actions. Holding the knight by the hair, she dragged him to Jin's feet. Jin told the knight that some of their patrons had greatly underestimated their opponents. After all, to become a nanny in the Rankandle family, you need to be a warrior of at least the 7th rank. So Jin advised him that if they wanted to kill any of the children, they should send 3 or 4 8th rank knights. Lying on the floor with 2 arms missing, the knight shouted with all his strength that this was just a warning and the rule of the Rankandle would soon come to an end. Jin said that he understood and that he wanted the same thing, because if the Rankandle rule comes to an end, then Jin Runkandle's rule will begin. The knight raised his head with the last of his strength as he looked at Jin and shouted glory to the great Zippel family. Jin thought about it and remembered what kind of Zippel family it was. Here we are introduced to another famous family. Apart from the Rangandles, there was another strong family that ruled the other half of the world. Unlike the Rangandles who chase after swordsmanship, this family is honing their magic skills. 1,000 years ago, after the death of the Rangandle founder Temur, Zippel and the Rangandles made a humiliating pact forbidding the Rangandles from using magic, and all their magical abilities were sealed. The Zippel family has been a sworn enemy of the Rankandle family for 1,000 years, and now it becomes clear what a humiliating contract Murakan was talking about. Jin said that he was wondering who would do such a thing, but these knights are just followers of the Zippels. He told Gilly that they would leave the knight somewhere nearby, since there was no point in talking to him. Then the nurse took the knight by the hair and dragged him somewhere. The knight only asked to kill him. Jin stood there thinking that even though the Zippels were sworn enemies of the Rankandle and still made the Rankandle fearful, they had nothing to do with what had happened today. It looks like their followers are doing whatever they want. Still, Jin felt that something wasn't quite right. What confused him was that no matter how good the disguise was, it wasn't that easy to trick a Rangan 7 warrior. And then he wondered if that had helped them, and the image of a man in a white shirt and glasses standing with his back turned made it impossible to make out his face. After throwing the knight out somewhere nearby, the nanny informed Jin that he had obeyed his orders. Jin then spoke to the captain of the Black King's squad. He told the captain that he had survived only because they had diverted attention to themselves and that as soon as Jin arrived at the castle he would report on how Captain Murika had helped them. Jin said that he had no doubt that the family would reward the captain handsomely, but for now he ordered him to take care of the teleportation gate. Suddenly, the captain looked at Jin standing next to the nanny and thought that Jin was just a child, but even though he was a Rankandle, wasn't it too early for him to walk around so freely outside the castle? Captain Murika didn't understand why Jin was so confident, since he was only 10 years old. And then Murika seriously thought about Jin's words. That really Jin's words about establishing the rule of Jin Rankandle are not childish fantasies and he is completely serious. After some thought, he turned to his subordinates and ordered them to monitor their behavior while the gate was being prepared for teleportation. He also ordered them not to do anything. The members of the Black King's squad didn't understand what the order was at all. They were upset and wondered why they should bother with their behavior at all. Apparently, I've never ordered this as a captain before. Jilly informed Captain Murika that they were ready to leave. Then let's go, he said, smiling awkwardly and putting his hand to his heart. The soldiers had never seen the captain behave like this, so they were also in a slightly awkward situation. The captain, Nanny, and Jin walked through the snowy location in front of Kama while the rest of the group walked behind. I don't think anything will happen if they leave those imposters unattended. Jin said that nothing would happen, even if they were found dead or alive, they would serve as a good example to their comrades. And he praised Jilly. Judging by the words of the Black King's squad, the heroes will reach the village in 2 hours, and there they plan to wait out the snowfall. Jin turned to Jilly. He said that she shouldn't blame herself for what happened today and that even Han, a knight of the 9th rank, didn't suspect anything. Therefore, it is even harder for her, warriors of the 7th rank, to notice something, and there is nothing wrong with what he says that a knight guardian should do. Jilly turned her back on Jin and apologized, feeling ashamed. Jin suddenly remembered that Jilly hadn't changed at all. The fate of every Rangandal nanny is linked to the fate of the child entrusted to her. Jilly had been his nanny in a previous life, so because he didn't have the talent, she was bullied by the other nanas, but she never blamed Jin. And when he was exiled from the family, Jilly was exiled with him. And then she only apologized to him for not being able to serve him properly, as she said, while bowing her head. This was how Jin was treated by Jilly in his previous life, so he decided that he wouldn't be too hard on her. The new life is radically different from the past, so Jilly also needs to harden her character. Young master, I will gladly accept any punishment for what has happened, Jilly said, putting one hand on the other. Suddenly, Jin started yelling at her. He told her to stop blaming herself and that it was in order. Jilly, meanwhile, stood submissively with her head down. Jin said that as long as she was his nanny, she was his only guardian. And if she freaked out over such trifles, it would only cause more problems in the future. He asked her not to be forced to repeat it twice and asked if she was clear. And then Jilly again lowered her gaze and feeling guilty promised that she would definitely improve. Jin led the way, a drop of sweat rolling down his face, embarrassed that he had just yelled at his babysitter. Along the way, Jilly thought that she had no idea that the master was so worried about her. She knew it was all for her own good. Therefore, she was determined to muster her willpower for Jin's safety. After thinking about it, she cheerfully and enthusiastically said that she would give it her all. Finally, the heroes reached that berry village. The heroes came to the hotel, where they took 2 rooms. Meanwhile, Jin continued to think about what had happened and the imposters, and he assumed that he was probably the one behind it. And here we were introduced to the same man in glasses and a white shirt. It turns out that he is a magician of reincarnation and his name is Buber Gaston. Although dragons are also good at reincarnation, even they are not able to reincarnate perfectly as they cast an unusual shadow. There's only one Buber in the world who can do that. With the help of his magic, he committed far more than one crime, reincarnating in various people, and all in order to sow chaos around the world. In that case, it was more complicated if Buber was really involved, even though he hadn't done anything special yet. And so our hero settled in a hotel. Jin recalled that in his previous life, when he was 20 years old, the Bement Empire's special branch arrested Buber. Jin reasoned that Buber might be useful. You just need to poach it. But Jin immediately wondered why you'd want to poach someone who once pointed a sword at you. Already sleepy and yawning, Jin thought that before Buber did any more damage, he needed to make sure that something was different from his previous life. Jilly hung up her fur coat, then turned to Jin and told him that she would guard him outside. Jin was already asleep. He was sleeping pretty soundly, so it wasn't a big deal that Jilly had almost accidentally woken him up. When she saw that Jin was asleep, she just smiled sweetly and left the room. Suddenly, sounds began to come from somewhere. We see that it is a black cat vigorously wagging its tail. It was meowing so loudly and insistently that Jin could hear it even in his sleep. Suddenly Jin woke up, and he didn't know how he fell asleep. Jin stretched, even though he had trained a lot in the Castle of Storm. But still, such loads are not suitable for a 10-year-old, he noticed. Meanwhile, strange noises continued to come from outside the room. Jin couldn't just let it go and decided to check out what was going on. He looked out the window and saw a strange black cat standing right behind him. When Jin saw this, he was speechless and surprised at the same time. At that moment, he remembered Muraken's words about hiding well. Jin leaned on the windowsill with one hand and covered his face with the other and said to the black cat that he had promised to follow him without being noticed. Did he mean to turn into a cat? An enraged Muraken in the form of a cat apologized, continuing to scratch the window. Jin let the cat in and said that he was surprised and didn't expect Muraken to look like this. Jin thought Muraken would turn into one of his servants, like a stable boy. In response, Muraken took on his human form and told Jin that he would have been declassified and if Jin had thought of it himself. Muraken continued to approach the boy, saying that Jin didn't know how hard it had been for him. At that moment, Muraken tripped over a plank sticking out of the wooden floor. Suddenly he fell with a crash, hit the windowsill on his face, and screamed in pain. Jilly immediately came running to such loud screams, she was agitated and literally rushed into the room shouting about whether something had happened. There was an awkward pause. Jin was standing awkwardly smiling and looking at the nanny, while Muraken was squatting next to him and holding his face. It hit so hard that it broke the thick wooden windowsill in two. Jilly asked Muraken how he dared to pursue the master. She was really angry at him and prepared to attack. She threw Muraken to the ground and stood over him, threatening to cut him to pieces if he didn't tell her everything. Even though Jilly was Jin Rankendall's nanny, she logically didn't know Muraken by sight, even though she might have heard the legends about him. At this time, Jin, fearing for Muraken, who was already half-conscious, hurried to stop her. He told her to stop, but he said her name because he wanted to explain everything to her. But then Mirakin remembered something that had to do with Jilly's name. Suddenly he sat up, put one hand to his chest and the other he held out to Jilly. His eyes were full of love and his face was flushed except for the bruise he'd received when he'd hit the windowsill. Mirakin told Jilly that they had finally met while calling her his strawberry shortcake. Hearing this, Jin felt very ashamed for Mirakin and lowered his head and covered his face with his hand. Mirakin told Gilly that he had been waiting for a long time to meet her, thus embarrassing her. Jin only realized that he and Murakami were in trouble. After that, Jin decided to start over and introduced Mirakin to the nanny, saying that he was the Rangandal guardian. The Black Dragon Mirakin. Why did he decide to introduce his nanny? But Mirakin interrupted him and said that he knows who she is. He said that she is still his strawberry cake. When she found out who Mirakin was, she said that she was only a lowly servant in the Rangandal household and apologized for her behavior. She bowed to him and asked him to forgive her. He told her not to worry and how he could be offended by calling her a strawberry. Jilly was confused and she asked Mirakin why he called her that. Because you are wonderful, beautiful and bake the most delicious strawberry pies, Mirakin replied. She thought about it and suddenly realized why the master asked her to make strawberry pies every day. Jin asked the nanny to sit down so he could explain everything. After hearing Jin's entire story, she said that there were a lot of things she didn't know about Master. Jin apologized to Jilly for having to lie to her. Even though Jilly knew that the Master had an exceptional talent, she couldn't imagine that the Master had magic, and she didn't know that he had signed a contract with Solderit, and now he had a dragon with him. She said that as his nanny, she was both shocked and happy. Jin said she was one of them now, and no one else should know about Mirakin's awakening and Jin's connection to him, at least not yet. Jilly said she understood. Then Mirakin told her not to worry, calling her a pie girl because he would always be with Jin. Jilly thanked Mirakin for his kindness. Suddenly, she started talking about that noise. She asked if it was from Mirakin's reincarnation. Then Mirakin replied that it wasn't so, and Jin warned him to be careful. Mirakin said he just fell. Jilly then went up to Jin and asked him sheepishly if he was sure Mirakin could be trusted. To which Jin hesitantly replied that yes, you can. At this time, Mirakin was laughing as if nothing had happened at the fact that he himself had fallen. The heroes were standing outside the middle teleportation gate building. The captain of the Black King's squad was also standing next to them. They were talking to Gilly and she said they did a great job addressing the entire Black King squad, and that the Rankandel family would reward them handsomely for their work. The captain thanked her and said that they had learned a lot on this mission, and that he would look forward to seeing her young Rankandel grow up. Jin was also standing next to him. Mirakin in the form of a cat was sitting on his shoulder. Now he could be next to Jin even in the form of a cat. Suddenly, the captain turned to the nanny by first and last name and asked her if it was possible to ask a personal question. Jilly allowed it, and then the captain said that she had an amazing talent, so why did she leave her family and become a nanny for young Rankandel? Jilly didn't say much, but after a short pause, she turned her back and said over her shoulder that it didn't matter and there was nothing interesting about it. Then the captain realized that it was rude of him and apologized to her, so they said their goodbyes, and so the heroes came to the middle teleportation gate. There they were met by a man who asked them to introduce themselves. Then Jilly took out the bundle and opened it to show the man what looked like the end of a sword with the Rankandel family crest on it. She said they needed to go to Kelowna, to Hewfester, to join the Allied forces. When he saw this, he immediately knew that they were from the Rankandel family. He said it was an honor to meet them and asked them to follow him. He said they'd give Jen and Jilly the best seats. This person informed them that they would have to wait 2 hours, but then they would be home in no time and wished them a pleasant trip. Jin and Jilly were sitting on a luxurious sofa with Mirakin the cat. Jilly told Jin that she was actually worried, because even if Mirakin was discovered, they might be able to get out of it, but what if? And then Jin beat her to it by asking if she was talking about magic. She said that none of the Rangandels are capable of using it. Then Jin smiled and told her not to worry. He knew that himself, so he would hide his magic. Suddenly, there was a commotion from somewhere. All three of them sitting on the sofa turned around to see what it was. Jin saw this and became alert. Suddenly, a man wearing a green robe with a golden dragon on it walked into the room. It was a guy with purple eyes and long white hair. Behind him were 2 large guards. They were all from the Zippel family, which is a sworn enemy of the Rankandel family. The man sat down across from Jin in silence. Jin was silent, but looking at this man, he tried to remember who it was because this man from the Zippel family looked familiar. Suddenly, the guy arrogantly clicked his tongue and said that he didn't want something in the Hewfester, showing contempt with all his appearance. Then he added, looking at the Rankandels, that he hadn't expected to see these dregs here. Although the nanny was full of anger, she was still silent, and Jin was as calm as possible and did not give in to provocations. Seeing Murakan a cat, this man said that the cat is cute. Smiling naively, he called the cat over and called it a good boy. But Murakan mercilessly attacked this guy, scratching his hand. Suddenly, the two men who were next to the boy became alert. They were about to use force, but the boy stopped them and said that everything is fine, this cat is just an animal, and he himself provoked it, and that it is better to keep your swords in the scabbard when Rangandela. Suddenly he thought about it and looked at Jin. This boy was trying to hurt them, but he didn't expect them to just ignore him. He noticed that the younger one, so he meant Jin, was very reserved. After that, he introduced himself. He said that his name was Veridin Zippel. He apologized for his rudeness, walked over to Jin and held out his hand. And then Jin exclaimed in his mind, he finally remembered who it was. Veridin Zippel is a genius magician, most likely the next head of the family. He is the equal of all young magicians, both in terms of skills and in terms of character. He's the one whose magical abilities Jin considered an unattainable ideal. But it was like this before. Jin didn't think that he would meet him at such a young age. Jin said that he was also curious about what Veridin was like. He's glad Veridin wasn't a complete. They started arguing and Jin said that if the guards had taken out their balls, Veridin would have gone to Hoofester without guards and without a couple of fingers. Veridin laughed and said that even the Rankhandle jokes were cruel. Jin asked if it looked like he was joking, giving Veridin a cold look. Then Veridin thought about it and decided to give Jin some advice. He said that if Jin meets someone else from the Zippel family, then don't rush to cut off someone's fingers, because this will add to the problems of both families. To which Jin replied that it was quite funny, and that their fathers, Shiren Rankhandle and Celiac Zippel, wouldn't start a war over some childish quarrel. Veridin considered this. He agreed with Jin and said that they would probably compensate for the damage with gold or something. He added that Jin had taught him something and said that he would pay him back later. Jin told him to pay him back right now, to which Veridin asked with a smile what he should do. Jin asked them to keep quiet until the gate was activated and let him rest. Veridin looked at Jin with interest and thought that in a couple of years he would become someone amazing. But despite Veridin's interest in Jin, they couldn't make friends with her because of their background. But Veridin was also happy with the idea that they might become sworn enemies. Jin, looking at the behavior of Veridin, who had already annoyed him, thought that the Ziplovs were not all right in the head. Suddenly, a voice came over the loudspeaker, thanking them for waiting and telling them that teleportation was about to begin. Before teleporting, Veridin called out Jin's name and said that it was nice to meet him and would look forward to the next meeting. Jin, on the other hand, showed no sympathy and said that he hoped that their meeting would never come. And so the main characters came to the castle by carriage. As soon as they got off the carriage, they were immediately met by the butler. He introduced himself as Pedro, the second manager of the house. It must have been hard to get here, Pedro said. He said that he would welcome them to the main castle of the Rangandles, and in the Garden of Swords. And so the main character found himself in the Garden of Swords, in the main castle of the Rangandle. The Garden of Swords is a place where those who have contributed to the prosperity of the Rangandle family can leave their sword. Thus, this garden is a symbol of the hopes and honor of every Rangandle. Walking along the Garden of Swords, the hero talks about how he once hoped that after his death his sword would be placed here, in the garden. He remembers that in the past he was weak, deprived of potential. He was never a leader or a blade. He didn't know why he'd ever thought that hard training would make a difference. But now, as far as Jin was concerned, his life in this worthless place would make sense. So Jin entered the castle. There he was met by his father and other members of the Rangandle family. He was first greeted by his mother, Rose Rankhandle, lady of the Rankhandle house, who goes by the nickname Black Panther. Jin also greeted his mother in return. Nurekin and Shiren suddenly locked eyes. Shiren's gaze wasn't gracious at all, and his face was sullen. Jin's father asked him what kind of cat was on his shoulder and where he had picked it up. The boy replied that he had taken him in. Shiren emphasized the difference between picked up and sheltered and said it was good that Jin could choose his words, because that's how a real Rankhandle should respond. At the same time, all of Jin's siblings in the room were looking at him with hatred because of his father's praise. Suddenly the cat jumped off Jin's shoulder and ran to his mother. His mother rose, while petting the cat, asked what his name was. Jin replied that his name was Moth Raknekdal. Hearing this, Jin's older brothers were outraged. One of them began to appeal to his father and mother, saying that this should not be allowed to get away with it. You cannot give an insignificant animal their last name. Then he turned to Jilly and asked her how she'd raised Jin in the first place. But then his father interrupted him. He asked Jin why his son had given the cat the name Rankhandle. Jin replied that he did it in order to be responsible. He said that maybe it's just a cat, but it's the first time he's sheltered someone, and if so, then the name should be meaningful. Nurekin in his cat form just looked at Jin happily. Jin's father Shiren found this very funny and asked him if he understood the significance of their last name since he was talking about it. Jin replied that he understood and said, while holding the cat in his arms, that if someone hurt the moth, he would pay for it. Shiren commented on Jin's words, noting that the boy has a talent for making enemies. Meanwhile, Jin's siblings were looking at him with angry eyes. Jin said that apparently he really has this talent, but he also has a talent for getting rid of enemies. We see Shiren smile broadly at this and say that his siblings should be more careful if they decide to deal with what he called Jin, the cheeky kid. Then Jin's parents, Shiren and Rose, went their separate ways. And here we are transported to the future. 4 years have passed since Jin came to the main castle of Rankandel. It's the summer of 1794. We see Jin standing with a wooden sword in his hands. He was training in fencing. At the moment, Jin Rankandel, is a 14-year-old knight of the second rank, also a cadet. We see him standing with his fencing coach. The coach said that it was time to finish training and that Jin had done a good job. Jin asked if that meant there would only be a morning workout. Coach Jin's name is Garen Altamir, and he is the guardian of House Rankandel, a knight who trains low-ranking cadets. He reminded Jin that young Lady Luna was planning to train him. Jin remembered this and decided that in that case, he should have a bite to eat, so he put the wooden sword back in its place and went to eat. Before he left, Garen asked him if he would have lunch with the cadets again, and he said that Madame Rose would be upset. Jin sighed heavily and said that it couldn't be helped because he didn't want to play peekaboo with his siblings over the food. Garen expressed his understanding and said that he would inform the lady. Jin was sitting on the stairs when suddenly a guy came up to him. He called Jin master and said that he had brought food. This guy is Belop Schmitz, guardian of the House of Rangandel, a low-ranking knight cadet. Jin thanked him for the meal. Belop sat down next to her and they both started eating. Belop was an ordinary commoner, 13 years old. Because of his lack of training, he was stripped of his rank and banished, and it was clear from Jin's look that he felt sorry for Belop. Jin then asked him if it was good for him, and Belop just smiled awkwardly. After that, we see what kind of speech Belop made. He said it was really delicious. He is very grateful to the Rankandel family for being able to eat such wonderful meat. He is especially grateful to the young master because Jin is always ready to share meat with him. Jin was embarrassed and asked Belop to stop. Jin said that Belop said the same thing yesterday and then asked if he knew it by heart. Belop scratched his head and laughed awkwardly. Then Jin told him that he should be more careful because of what Belop says, what's on his mind, everyone looks down on him. Belop really looked simple and seemed very naive. Jin continued to give him advice and told Belop to straighten his shoulders, hold his head higher and become at least a little more confident. He reminded Belop that he was a Rankandel Knight cadet. Then Belop confusedly said that his grades were terrible and he hadn't even reached the first rank. Jin sighed heavily and reassured him that even becoming a cadet wasn't easy. No matter how bad Belop's grades are, he's still better than his peers who didn't make it here, Jin said. Jin watched Belop eat and thought that he was so pure and sincere. I wouldn't be surprised if even his relatives, Jin thought, but at the same time, he couldn't understand something. How someone so pure, trained by Sword Master Hiron, became a loyal of the Bement Empire. How he turned into a ruthless killer. When Jin found out that Belop had become an imperial bodyguard, Jin was shocked, and when Jin found out that he had committed suicide, the master was upset. So Jin couldn't afford to leave Belop, because then who knows what would happen to him. Jin then shared a piece of meat with Belop. Belop was happy even for such a seemingly trivial matter. Jin was personally going to make sure that Belop wasn't kicked out this time. He said that he was already dead, and he wouldn't repeat his mistakes again. We see a picture of Jin walking down the hall and talking about what he has achieved. He has 2nd rank Shadow Energy Release, 4th rank Mana, and 2nd rank Swordsmanship. Everything is not going badly. At this rate, Jin plans to reach the 3rd rank in Swordsmanship. And we see that Jin has come to the training room. The moon was already waiting for him there. She said that today they will continue yesterday's training. However, this time it will be a little different, Luna said. She said the phrase that the heart is your eyes. She told him to look with your heart. Jin obeyed and did what Luna said. He was embarrassed because he had never heard of such training, but he had no choice. Luna explained that for those who live in fencing, it is extremely important to open their inner vision. She told him not to open his eyes. Standing with his eyes closed, Jin thought that only knights who have reached the 7th rank can comprehend inner vision, and Luna wants to train someone who can get the 2nd rank. In addition, inner vision is usually achieved by dispelling the aura, but during training with the moon, Jin can't use the aura. He decided to trust her, so he continued to do what she told him and focus on his training. He firmly believed that one day he would understand how to do it, and now we see that the training session has already come to an end. Luna praised Jin, saying that he was doing great as always and that he could come back again. Jin was grateful for what she was doing. After training, Luna thought that as she expected, he was doing well, but each time, he exceeds her expectations. Jin shows a concentration that is not typical of a 2nd rank knight. Luna is sure that with such a potential, he will understand everything in a couple of years. Jin was leaving, and we can see that Luna glanced at him and wished only for him to keep growing. And we are transported to the open courtyard in the castle, where all the cadets were already standing and they were lined up in a row. Jin went there and was greeted by Coach Garen. Jin glanced at the cadets and said they were nervous. Garen replied that today was a crucial sparring session. If the cadets get a good grade, they will become a Night Guardian faster. It's hard not to be nervous, Garen said. Then, turning to Jin, he said that today was also an important day for the master. According to Garen, Rose said that if Jin defeated 10 higher-ranked opponents, he would be able to start training in the advanced group starting next year. Then Jin saw Bellop among the cadets, who was shaking with fear. Jin thinks about doing something to keep Bellop from getting kicked out, but Bellop still lacks confidence. It was time for Coach Garen to announce to the cadets that today they would take turns fighting 3 opponents, and the top 10 will face Jin one-on-one. The cadets understood the command, and now we see that they are already fighting. Coach Garen watched the fights of the cadets and commented on one of the fights, saying that it was very good and the training did not pay off in vain. There were 3 cadets left on the bench who were not selected, and Garen told them that they could sit back down. And we see the following picture. Garen tells Jin to get ready, and Jin himself is in full combat readiness. And so he quickly delivers a crushing blow to his opponent, which knocks her sword out of her hands. Jin won in just one blow. Standing over the defeated opponent, he remembers that earlier, in a previous life, he defeated 8 opponents. Right now, he only needs 2 more wins. But as it is clear from his words, he was wary of one of the rivals. At the same time, Garen called out to the next opponent. And then the girl he'd been wary of came out. This girl's name is Meza Milkano. She is a Night Cadet of House Rangandel from the normal group. She was one of the few people who would become a Night Guardian after completing her training. When she came out to fight, she told Jin that she would beat him today, no matter what the cost. Jin replied that he was looking forward to it. But in his mind, the battle with her was the most important moment in the trial. After exchanging a few words, they began to fight. Meza immediately took off and threw a punch at Jin, but he managed to block it. Jin thought back to his previous life. He noticed that Mesa was even stronger than before, but it wasn't enough to defeat the current Jin. Still, Jin knew that he would have to fight 8 more after her, so he started attacking Mesa with simple punches. She noticed that he had previously demonstrated a wide variety of techniques. She was sure there was a reason, but she couldn't figure it out. Or, as she thought, he was underestimating her because he didn't think she could win. At that moment, Jin attacked Mesa. She still chose to think that he underestimated her. Firmly gripping her sword, she fiercely attacked Jin in return. She wanted to show him that she shouldn't be underestimated. The cadets standing to the side could only watch this battle in surprise. Jin, meanwhile, kept up the pressure, and we see Meza not wanting to let Jin push her aside and wanting to surpass him. She pounces on him, swinging her sword wide, and then her strike reached Jin's sword. The moment their swords came together, Mace's sword couldn't withstand Jin's precise strike in the middle, so the other half of Mace's sword flew out of the way. Meza was confused, and she didn't understand what had happened or how her sword had broken. As a sign of his victory, Jin held a wooden sword to her throat. He told her it was a good fight. Then Jin looked at the sword and said that it was useless now. Suddenly, Mesa realized that the Jin had been hitting the same spot all along. She was thinking that even though their strength and stamina were the same, she would never be able to beat him in accuracy and perseverance, since Jin was Rankandel's son after all. After thinking about everything, she turned to Jin and said that she would devote herself to training completely and would definitely win. Everything was going according to plan. It was hard for Jin to fight the others in this state, but because of Mesa's crushing defeat, the other cadets were sure beforehand that they couldn't beat Jin. And now we see that the challenge is over. Jin won all 10 opponents. Jin was glad that everything went as he expected. It's easy to see that Jin was pretty exhausted after 10 fights in a row. Coach Garen told Jin that it was amazing and added the following. Starting next year, Jin will be trained by real Rankandelas, and then Garen congratulated him. Jin thanked Garen and said that as long as he wasn't transferred to the advanced group, he was counting on him. It was almost time for the morning training session to end, and Garen wanted to take stock of it and go to lunch. But Jin wanted to take on another cadet in the 10 minutes that remained. He picked up his sword, and when Garen asked him who Jin wanted to fight, Jin loudly called out the name Bellop Schmitz. Bellop was confused and afraid. What can I say? Even if the cadets standing nearby were scared. Jin told Bellop to fight. Bellop was very scared. He tried to object, but then Jin shouted his name again. He pointed his sword at Bellop and said that he couldn't survive in the Rankandel family there. He ordered Bellop to come forward and fight and threatened to destroy him. And then we see a picture of Bellop walking unsteadily towards Jin. Bellop was standing in front of Jin, holding a sword, and he didn't understand why the master had chosen him, if only because Bellop was weak and Jin wanted to teach him military discipline. Jin looked at Bellop seriously and told him that he was quite tired from all the fighting, while Bellop was full of energy, but he was still stronger, so Jin called Bellop. Bellop couldn't understand the master. Right after saying that to Bellop, Jin charged in. He hit Bellop. Bellop asked why Jin was doing this. Jin continued to attack. Bellop's shouts rang out. When Bellop blocked another shot from Jin, Jin came up and said that he was blocking well. After that punch, Jin jumped back. Then he threw dust in Bellop's eyes. I started attacking while he couldn't see anything. Jin swung down and knocked Bellop off his feet. Bellop's eyes filled with tears, and he was in pain. Jin told him that he didn't just call him out for a fight, but because he wanted to fight him. Standing over Bellop, Jin said that he could have killed him. He ordered him to get up and that he would not spare him again. Meanwhile, the cadets continued to watch in horror. Suddenly, Bellop began to rise, and a golden aura began to radiate from him. The cadets noticed this, and it turned out that Bellop was watching with an aura. Bellop was crying, but there was also anger on his face, and a yellow gold aura enveloped him. Meza said they needed to stop right away, because if this continued, Jin might get hurt. The trainer was in shock. He was watching the fight closely, so he didn't hear what Meza was shouting. Jin ordered Coach Garen that whatever he saw now, he would take with him to the grave. Garen said he understood, and Meza was shocked. Bellop then asked if this was what Jin wanted. He replied that this was exactly the case. Jin told Bellop not to hold back if he knew how to use aura. Bellop bared his teeth and said that Jin had made a terrible mistake if he wanted to fight him and that he should have acted sooner. With that, Bellop attacked Jin, and now we see that their swords collided. Jin blocked Bellop's attack, but his sword didn't hold. Bellop broke Jin's sword in two with a single blow. Jinwoo, meanwhile, was thinking that he knew that Bellop was strong, but he didn't think that he was that strong. During training sessions, Bellop always managed to understand the opponent's strategy and assess their skills, and then deliberately lost. But Jin would never have thought that Bellop already had an aura. Jin was extremely surprised. Jin's sword was broken, leaving him unarmed. Then he decided to fight with a different weapon, namely with his hands. He hit Bellop's arm while he was swinging his sword. With that blow, Jin knocked the sword out of Bellop's hands. Suddenly, Jin approached him and grabbed him. Bellop was also left without a sword, and Jin knocked him down and took a chokehold. Jin held Bellop and waited for him to give up. But he didn't give up, so Jin let him go. Bellop lay exhausted on the floor as Jin approached. Bellop, holding his throat and standing on all fours, asked Jin why he stopped, because he himself wanted a decent fight and said that then it was necessary to fight to the end. He asked Jin if he really enjoyed playing with people that much. Jin replied that it wasn't. Bellop countered by asking why Jin had arranged all this. Jin replied that he didn't want to provoke Bellop and that he had no idea how much. All of a sudden, we see Jin get down on one knee in front of Bellop. Bellop asked him what Jin knew about him that made him so stubborn. Jin, reaching for the sword, said that he didn't know anything about it, but he knew this: to be kind and caring, you need to be strong. Bellop is weaker than Jin, but kinder at the same time. Putting his hand on Bellop's shoulder, he said that he liked that trait about Bellop. But the good cannot survive in this hell. Jin then asked Bellop to become stronger so that he could protect the good with him and the others. Jin apologized to him for being rude. Then Bellop burst into tears. At this time, the servants of the palace came with food. They asked if the training was going on and if they should come back later. Jin replied that everything was fine and told them to bring in the food. Bellop was still sitting on the floor, wiping away his tears, and he had told the master to go to lunch. Jin smiled and said that he would take a portion for Bellop as well. And we are transported to another location. We see that Shiren is sitting on the floor and Han is standing next to him. After Shiren listened to Han, he asked him if the younger one really said that. Khan confirmed it. Then Shiren laughed out loud and said the following sentence: so that's what his beliefs are. Jin wants to rule the strong and help the weak. Shiren said that in this case, it is necessary to understand whether such an approach is beneficial to the Rankandel family. He ordered Han to go back and hand Jin over, and he said it was time for Junior to go on his first assignment, and were transported back to the academy. It's January 1795. Jin is 15 years old and has been promoted to a third-rank knight. The first vacation started. The cadets either left for their hometowns and villages, or they stayed to continue their individual training sessions. When cadets advance to the advanced group, they can forget about wooden swords and they will be given a custom-made sword. Some of the cadets had already given the blacksmiths instructions regarding their swords. Jin was thinking that he also wanted to find a suitable sword in their armory, but Luna would choose his sword because she wanted it. It turns out that a month ago, Luna tried to persuade Jin to let her choose his own sword. But Jin didn't mind, because Luna is a better swordsman, so you just have to trust her. And so Luna showed the sword she had chosen. Jin clearly didn't like this sword. He was embarrassed. Luna said that this sword is also called Veil Slayer. At Jin's age, she'd used it a lot herself. Back then, she wanted to use something like a sword axe with a similar shape. She looked at the sword and said that the shape of the krantle she used to fight with came from him. She asked Jin if he liked the sword. Jin didn't know what to say. After collecting his thoughts, he said that he was grateful for her help in choosing a sword, but it was unlikely that such a sword would be suitable for him. Then she was disappointed and said that she was just joking. But Jin knew it didn't sound like a joke. Luna then tried to talk Jin out of it, telling him that Veil Slayer was a really good sword, even if it was a little heavy. Jin was embarrassed to watch and watched in silence. Then Luna saw his expression and understood. She said that she understood him, and so be it with another sword. Jin let out a sigh of relief. Luna opened the doors of the armory and said that she really tried her best when choosing it. She was thinking about which sword would suit Jin best, which sword would suit only him. And then she took the sword in her hands and said that she had thought of him. Since Jin had chosen Barasada at the selection ceremony, this sword would suit him best. Jin was pleasantly surprised. He recognized this sword. This sword is called the brother of the Barasada, which belonged to the founder. This sword is called Bradamante. Jin was thrilled, and Luna said he seemed to like the sword. This sword is unique. Even the other swords from the family collection can't compare to it, Jin said. He reasoned that he would have done anything to get that sword, and was delighted that Luna had chosen Bradamante for him. Bradamante and Barasada are best compatible with shadow energy. If Jin had chosen it himself, then his siblings would have objected. Then Jin said that the others wanted Bradamante too, and he didn't even know how to thank her. Upon hearing this, Luna told him that something didn't add up and she thought he was still uncomfortable with her. This started to upset Luna. Jin quickly retorted and told her that it wasn't true at all and that he wasn't lying to her. She said that she was already upset, so he would have to comfort her. After that, they started training. Luna asked him to remember something else. She said that among all the brothers and sisters who try to trample on each other, there are also those who selflessly love him, and once again asked him to remember this well. Then she took him by the shoulders and told him not to upset her again. Luna said that she had already spent enough time alone, long before Jin was born, and that she didn't want him to be alone like she once was. So Luna went back to training, and she told Jin to watch with his heart. When he returned from training, he immediately showed the sword to Murakan. Murakan, without distracting himself from the comics, told him to put the sword away. It's too early for him because he didn't master the shadow energy enough. He explained that to properly use Bradamante, shadow energy must be at least rank 3, and Jin is still a brat with the second rank. Besides, Murakan said that Jin wouldn't even be able to awaken the sword. But Jin didn't listen and believed that he would soon reach the 3rd rank and be able to use Bradamante. And suddenly Murakan was distracted from reading the comics. He made a remark to Jin and told him to listen carefully. Murakan took Jin by the head and told him that Barasada and Bradamante couldn't be used randomly. They needed 3rd rank shadow energy, and that was the bare minimum. He ordered Jin to use a normal sword until his strength reached the 5th rank. Jin retorted that he didn't like waiting too long and that he only needed to reach rank 5 in a year. Murakan frowned, then said that it was impossible even if Jin won the shadow contest. Murakan ridiculed Jin's plans, said that it was nonsense and asked him not to talk such nonsense anymore. Jin was annoyed, so he picked up the comic book like he was going to tear it up and asked Murakan what he was saying. Suddenly I came into the room and saw this picture and asked if everything was all right. She then informed him that Coach Garen was calling for him. Jin was asked to come himself because Garen had to explain the strategy to him and show him everything on the map. Jin asked what strategy he was talking about. Jilly said that Coach Garen would be helping him with his first assignment and that Jin would move out as soon as he was rested. Jin mused aloud that it was a good time for the mission since he had recently been awarded the 3rd rank, but it was strange that they were moving out after a rest. He came to the conclusion that perhaps this is due to the complexity of the task, because they are usually assigned from an advanced group or higher. Jin said that he probably already proved himself worthy. He went to the coach and asked Gilly to wait here with Murakan. Jin opened the door and went into the office. He told Garen that he had come for a mission. Garen asked Jin to pass and said that only 10 cadets from the normal group, including Jin, got it. And then Garen began to explain the strategy to them. The cadets will be divided into 2 groups. This is a search task. They will go to the southern border of the Jin Kingdom. It was quite a dangerous place because this kingdom is not far from the land of monsters as well as from the base of the Flame White Wolf. They shouldn't send low-ranking cadets to this place, Jin thought. He noticed something was wrong because this is quite difficult for the first task and it was issued earlier than it should be. The cadets were given a map and instructions for the squad members and then everyone was shocked. The squad included cadets with average scores and even Bellop, whose grades were constantly fluctuating. It looked like someone had deliberately set it up. Jin knew that someone was his father. He realized that his father might have been informed of their battle with Bellop and that Shiren had decided to test Jin in this way. Jin was very serious. He accepted these conditions and was determined to show his father what he could do because his beliefs are unshakable. We're being moved forward 3 days, and the cadets are already at the southern border of the Jin Kingdom. In order to complete the mission, they must find Sember Will, the heir of the Will family from the Jin Kingdom. According to their plan, they will set up camp in the central section of the border, and after that, each squad will go on a search. They also decided that every day at the designated time, a selected person from each squad would come to the camp to share information with the others. Jin ordered everyone to call themselves the commander and said that the injured should stay in the camp until they fully recovered. When everyone stopped, one of the party members said that they had noticed a monster from the Water Tail tribe. These monsters from the Water Tail tribe are cute creatures that avoid predators, which means they won't run into the White Wolf tribe right now. Jin had ordered what appeared to be Bellop to go to camp 2 hours earlier and then return to Sector 13 since he couldn't go fast because of the snowfall. He ordered the rest of the team to start searching Sector 13. Jin had a bad feeling that his father had personally assigned them to this mission, but everything was going too smoothly. Jin allowed for the possibility that he had misunderstood everything and this was just an assignment, not a test from Shire. And we see that a bunch of cute little creatures have come up to the cadets. One of the Tail Tribe monsters said that they felt sorry for the guys and gave Jin a fried fish. Jin accepted the gift and thanked him, promising to repay his kindness later. The hero carefully considered his plan of action. After Sector 13, the land of the Beastmen begins, and the cadets from the normal group are no match for them. Therefore, they should not strain too much for the sake of results. For the next 3 days, Jin will only confirm the results of the search in each of the sectors. And suddenly we see someone running towards Jin. It turned out to be Bellop. He informed Jin that the second squad was ambushed. The cadets were frightened. Jin ordered the cadets to prepare to move out and Bellop to report the situation. Bellop reported that the second squad had spread out to get away from the enemy, and only one had been able to reach the camp and report what had happened. Jin started questioning Bellop, and we find out that the ambush was set up by ordinary people. There were 3 of them. Bellop said why would anyone attack the Rangandals with such a small force. Jin agreed and said that he was sure there were many more of them. He then ordered Eddington and David to return to the camp to guard it and the surrounding area. He told them that it was forbidden to make contact with the enemy when detected. He ordered them to report to him first if anything happened. Jin thought about how many people might have set up the ambush, but he couldn't even guess what their goal was or why they were attacking the second squad instead of the first, which included Jin himself. He doesn't know who they are, but he was determined to personally make them pay for daring to touch the Runandals. Suddenly, Jin motioned for the group to stop. They saw footprints and blood on the snow. Bellop was horrified when he saw this, and he didn't want to think about the possibility that Mesa and the entire second squad might be dead. Jin reassured him that the blood was still fresh. After examining the place, he said that there were no signs of falling or pieces of flesh. He added that they fought here, but the second group escaped. Judging by the tracks, they were only attacked by one person. Suddenly, Sierra, one of the group members, found a bandage made in Hewfester where the cadets came from. She said she found them on the west side. In his mind, Jin imagined a map that showed a rough outline of the squad's movement. While the second squad was dressing the wounded man, someone else attacked and they had to flee to the west. Jin then ordered Sierra to go to Eddington and David's camp and explain everything to them, and ordered Bellop to follow him. And so they ran. Suddenly they stopped and hid behind the birches. They saw the second squad, but Mesa wasn't with them, and the cadets themselves were guarded by all 3 of them. Jin ordered Bellop to close his eyes briefly and attack the one on the left in 2 seconds. Jin took out a knife and started using shadow energy on it. It turns out that Murakan taught the hero to use the energy of shadows in such a way as to increase the sharpness and destructive power of the object, so the knife was more difficult to notice. Jin then threw a knife at one of the attackers. One of the squad members killed one of the guards. The second one was attacked by Bellop, but the guard noticed him and blocked his attack. Suddenly, Jin arrived from the other side and threw a punch at him. The guard fell, screaming in pain. Jin stood over him and asked if everyone was safe. The battered members of the second squad said that they were fine, but Mesa was a prisoner. They said that they were not forgiven for this. Jin told them to take care of themselves first. Jin was standing over one of the guards, the guard begging for mercy. But Jin said that for a Zippel follower, he valued his life too much. Jin decided to give him a choice. If the guard tells you who they are, what their purpose is, and where the base is, then only he will die. Or else, if he kept his mouth shut, Jin would kill not only the guard, but also his loved ones. He said that he would keep his promise, because he is Jin Rankendall, and then he swore on the honor of his family. The guard chose the first option. He said that they are a group of revolutionaries Canzello, and we see that the genie is transferred to the Memories, a terrorist organization that was active just before his death. The world was filled with panic when they killed a bunch of people in King Jin. They call themselves revolutionaries, and revolution is for them to overthrow kings and put their own at the head of the whole world. And here we are transported back and see the dialogue between Jin and the guard. The hero asked the guard if they wanted to cause trouble in the Jin kingdom by killing the Rankendall cadets. The guard replied that he didn't know anything because he was just a 6, and that he didn't even know where the base was, but his group was located right near the Beastman lands. There are about 24th rank warriors and more mages. Jin then asked one last question. He asked why they had taken Mesa. The guard replied that it was just for the sake of propaganda to promote the revolution. They were ordered to take all the girls alive. Then one of the members of the group, being enraged, said that they were just scum. And we see Jin taking the sword and saying that he will keep his promise. Then we see that the blood has been left on the snow. After killing the guard, Jin asked the squad members how long it had been since Mesa disappeared, and they said that it had been about an hour. This meant that they were already close to their campsite. Jin ordered the group to give everyone first aid and request backup. One of the cadets asked Jin if he was going to go alone. Jin had a reasonable assessment of his own strength, and he knew that there were 24th rank men out there, and the cadet was right, it was too dangerous to go alone. Scott said that they were only cadets, and cadets often died during missions, so he asked Jin not to take any chances. But the hero was determined. He said that once one of them was captured, Rankendel couldn't leave him. Jin said that he was stronger than the cadets thought and that any objections would be considered insubordination, and then turned to Bellup. And he said that all the members of the second squad were injured, so he is the strongest among them. Jin hurried over to Mesa, wanting to be in time before they did something terrible to her. As Jin ran, he assessed the situation. His swordsmanship and energy are ranked 3rd, and his magic is ranked 4th. He is growing quite fast, but now he can't cope with all of them at once. The main thing for him is to save Mesa, so he decided that he would try to avoid fighting. He focused on the search and cast an exploration spell, and then the wind tracking spell. A green line pointed him toward the meadow, and he ran. While Jin was running, he was attacked. Several revolutionaries and a magus charged out of the bushes. He used magic to kill one of them. An enraged revolutionary with a sword attacked Jin, but Jin deftly drew his Bradamante sword and repelled the attack. And we see that the magician began to cast fire magic and warned the warriors to move back. Suddenly, with the help of fire magic, he grabbed Jin's hand with something that looked like a fire whip. Seeing this, one of the warriors decided that this was the most convenient moment to attack, since Gino was being held by a mage, but Jin beat him to it and hit him right in the stomach with his sword. The mage was holding Jin with a flaming whip, but suddenly Jin pulled on it and dispelled the magic. The mage was confused and didn't understand why his fire magic didn't work on Jin. The mage then started using ice magic, but that didn't bother Jin either. The mage couldn't believe his eyes. He stood there in horror, trying to figure out what was wrong with his magic as Jin approached him. Jin threw a punch and there was blood splattering everywhere. Jin called them the Kinzello. He suggested that perhaps they are not trying to hide because they expect that the opponents do not have combat experience. He saw the tracks and realized that the others had left in a cart. Kinzello has its own hierarchy, and Jin guessed that they probably split their loot according to their position in the group. This means that they will not dare to touch the share of the one who is more important, which means that there is still a chance to save Mesa. Jin took a look at the map. He said that he was already close to the Beastman lands and Kinzello base was somewhere nearby. And then he decided to distract them. He used fire magic. Then he set fire to the forest and started a big fire. It was part of his plan. The Kinzellos noticed that they were on fire. Everyone ran outside and went to put out the fire. Jin surreptitiously observed this. One of the revolutionaries began to command. He ordered the magicians to use water or ice magic. Jin thought that he was the boss, but it turned out that they called him boss. The boss shouted that the fire couldn't have started in this weather and said that it was definitely set by someone. Just as he started giving the order to find the instigator, Jin was already standing behind him. Suddenly, the boss turned around after hearing something, but Jin silently knocked him down. There was so much thick smoke from the fire that Jin and the revolutionary boss couldn't be seen on the roof. After knocking out the boss of the revolutionaries, he found the keys. Then we see him open the door to a certain room. There, he started looking for Mesa. He saw that there was a basement. After that, we are shown pink hair. And then we see that Jin has found a connected Mesa. She said why he did it. It's dangerous here. Jin told her not to worry about him and asked if she could go. She said she could, but she didn't think she could run, so Jin released her. Suddenly, they heard strange noises. Suddenly, Mesa asked Jin to promise her something. She asked him to leave her if he was in danger. She couldn't let Jin get hurt. Then he just held her back and said that we need to leave and that it's dangerous here. When they went outside, they saw that all the revolutionaries were killed and everything around them was destroyed. When he saw the claw marks on the revolutionaries, he realized that it was the beastmen from the warrior tribe who had tried. We can see that Jin and Mesa are looking somewhere else, and it's clear from the look in Mesa's eyes that she's obviously not happy. Then we are shown a shadow whose silhouette looks like a wolf. After that, we see a hand that is covered with fur and holds a weapon. And here we see a beastman from the white wolf tribe. This beastman was huge, and he was holding something that looked like a hammer axe in his hands. Mesa said she would distract him and asked him to run, but Jin knocked her out with a blow to the neck and she fell unconscious. At that moment, the beastman clicked his tongue and said that they were all useless and were of no use because they couldn't even put out a fire. Then he turned to Jin and asked if it was all his fault. Jin replied that this was true and introduced himself, saying that he was the son of Shiren Runkandel, Jin Runkandel. And the next picture opens up. The beastman was much larger than Jin, and he was also very angry. Jin was fearless. He ordered the beastman to give his name. Hearing that Jin was a Rankendel, the wolf simultaneously bared its teeth, apparently having a grudge against the Rankendels. All of a sudden, we are transported to the events a few days before the start of the search mission to the Rankendel house. We see that he is holding his Bradamante sword and the energy of shadows begins to radiate from it. Suddenly, Mirakan appeared out of nowhere and interrupted Jin by kicking him. Mirakan was angry. He told Jin that Jin might die. Mirakan warned him. He also said that Jin wasn't ready yet, and if Jin tried to awaken the sword again, the shadow energy would poison him. He warned Jin that if he didn't want to die from too much shadow energy, he shouldn't even think about awakening the sword. And so we are transported back to the present. We see that the beastman is shouting at Jin, calling him Runkandel. He said he was going to have a better hunt today. The wolf introduced himself and said that his name was Kuajito Truka. He was a warrior of the Truka family. He was from the White Wolf tribe. This tribe is made for battle and slaughter. An adult white wolf is at least a rank 6 warrior. Everyone knows that the White Wolf tribe doesn't like Rangandels, and all because a long time ago, the founder of the Rankandel family called their god, the great white wolf Javier, to him and killed him. Jin knew that he couldn't escape with Mesa. Kuajito screamed that he would sacrifice Gina to Javier so that his soul could rest in peace. Kuajito gave Jin a choice and said, either they fight in a fair duel, or the wolf will tear him to pieces while Jin runs away with his tail between his legs. Jin took a stance and said that he was choosing a fair fight. Kuajito started the attack. While he attacked, he said that the choice of Jin means that the Rankandelas are not devoid of nobility and that then let the strongest win. He hit Jin with his axe, but Jin managed to jump out of the way. But the wolf didn't stop and immediately launched a second attack. Jin blocked this attack, but he no longer had the strength to block its attacks. They exchanged blows again. However, Jin estimated that he could still win. He has an ace up his sleeve that Kuajito doesn't even know about. A pendant given by the moon and the energy of shadows. But Jin wasn't sure if it was worth wasting the pendant on such a threat. If Jin couldn't handle such an opponent, then he didn't have a chance to become stronger, he thought. However, in addition to all this, Jin couldn't use magic, since his 4th rank magic wouldn't even leave a scratch on a wolf. In addition, if the Guardian Knight is sent to investigate Canzello, he will immediately see traces of mana, and then Jin will definitely be discovered and expelled from the family. And so, after thinking about it, Jin came to the conclusion that there was no other choice and he would have to use the energy of the shadows. The wolf continued to press, while Jin continued to block and dodge the attacks. Pushing Jin back, the wolf said that he had a good sword, but for some reason it wasn't black like the famous Rangandel swords. After that, the wolf rushed at Jin, swinging his axe and said that Jin was stronger than he looked, but Jin managed to dodge. He tried to remember what it felt like when he tried to awaken the sword. The wolf, meanwhile, continued to morally push Jin. He said that he was finished and he would sacrifice both Jin and his white sword to Javier. When Jin was already at the peak of his emotions, he remembered. What we can see is that shadows have formed around Kuajito and Jin. The wolf could not understand what was happening. Everything was dark in his eyes. He said that he could not see anything. Suddenly, Gina threw a punch at Kuajito's stomach area. Jin's sword blade was shrouded in shadow energy, and the wolf now understood why the Rankandel were famous for their black swords. The wounded wolf was killed without understanding how Jin managed it. Jin just said it was a good fight. After defeating the wolf, Jin came to his senses because he was very tired. Suddenly, his eyes filled with shadow. Jin was screaming in pain. It looked like what Mirakan had said had happened. Suddenly, Jin collapsed on the ground. He was in a place where everyone was calling him names, calling him a jerk and a disgrace to his family. This place was filled with shadow energy. Suddenly, someone appeared in front of him. It was Mirakan's silhouette, and he reminded Jin of what he had said about what would happen if Jin decided to awaken the sword while he didn't have enough energy. He said that he would have to pay the price. Mirakan asked Jin how much longer he would lie in the mud poisoned by shadow energy, and then told him to get up, because if Jin lost, it would all be over. Mirakan asked Jin if he still didn't know what to do. Suddenly, Jin remembered to release the energy of the shadows. The shadow energy surrounding Jin was destroying everything and he couldn't use the release, but he wasn't going to give up. He relaxed, and then after a couple of tries, he finally succeeded. He let out a sigh of relief. He noticed that the pain was suddenly gone, which bothered him and seemed too strange. His body didn't change at all, but he was filled with the energy of the shadows. But he could still move, so he decided it was time to pick up Mesa and leave. When he suddenly heard a noise behind the rocks, he asked who was there. A guy poked his head out, terrified, and begged me not to kill him. Jin thought the man was from Canzello. The man said that he was Semberville from the Jin Kingdom. Jin introduced himself to Sember and said that he was sent to find Sember. Sember was very happy to have met Rankandel, and he was crying with happiness. Jin even managed to forget about him because of Canzello. So Jin met Sember and they met. Then we see Jin take Mesa away. She said she would never forget his kindness. Jin replied that it was nothing and that he was paid for it after all. After taking Mesa, Jin asked Sember how it was that he was kidnapped by Canzello. Sember said that he was following his beloved. Jin asked if they really decided to run away together. Sember got nervous and said it was because she had died 2 years ago. But her face, her voice, even the 2 moles on her arm are exactly the same as when she was alive. Jin immediately thought that since it was an exact replica, it must have been Buber Gaston's handiwork. He supposed they probably wanted to kidnap Sember for the money, but he couldn't figure out if there was any connection between Buber and Canzello. The last time Jin encountered Buber was when he was 10, and here he was again. Jin suspected something was wrong. He was thinking about meeting Buber, finding out what kind of person he was. Fortunately for Jin, Buber's atelier is located in the Kurano Principality, and when Jin moves to the advanced group, he will definitely stop by. Jin said that reinforcements will be arriving soon, so it's time to head back. When Sember heard this, he burst into tears because Gina had summoned the Guardian Knights for his sake, but it was actually for Mesa's sake. Sember said that he would never forget their meeting and that if Jin ever needed his help, he would just let him know, but Jin only responded coldly. We see that the heroes have returned. Where Gina was met by the nanny, she was very happy and congratulated him on the successful completion of the task. She said that Jin was probably tired, so she prepared a bath for him. Jin was happy and was thanking Jilly when suddenly the cat in the back called Jin over. Jin pretended as if nothing had happened, walked up to Muraken and decided to pet him, asking if he was behaving well. But the Muraken cat bit him. Jin threw the cat away. Jin and Muraken were angry. Gina asked why Muraken bites, and in response received a question whether he is in his right mind. Muraken lashed out at Jin, during which he reminded him that he had told him many times not to awaken his sword. He had said this many times. Muraken said that Jin might ruin everything, and that he was worried about him. While Jin asked me to just listen. All of a sudden, Muraken transformed into a human and was already attacking Jin in this form. He said there were no excuses for Jin and asked what could be more important than the life of Solder, its sole follower. Jilly tried to separate them, but she said that the master had just returned. Then suddenly he said that she didn't bring strawberry shortcake and it looks like they have a problem. Jin tried to justify himself by saying that his friend was kidnapped right out from under his nose and who knows what would happen if he left Mesa. But Muraken said that Jin has a pendant and this is not some costume jewelry, by the way. Jin said that he didn't want to waste it, explaining that he might encounter much more powerful enemies. Muraken was even angrier that it would be considered a waste for Jin to use the pendant. Jin didn't understand why Muraken was so surprised, as Muraken continued to speak negatively about Jin. But then Jin asked how Muraken knew that he had tried to awaken the sword, to which Muraken replied that Jin's shadow energy rank had skyrocketed from 3rd to 4th, so it wasn't hard to guess. Jin said that he felt the energy of the shadows overwhelm him, but he never imagined that he would jump an entire rank. But Muraken said that Jin should thank Solderit for his mercy. A total of 10 people had experienced shadow energy poisoning. Now counting Jin as 11, and 9 of them had died. Jin is one of the survivors. He asked who the other one was, assuming it was the founder. But Muraken said he was second, and Temer would have died. Jin waved his hand and said that it meant that he and Muraken were similar. He asked him not to worry, because he wasn't ready to experience such pain again, and then Jin went to wash up. Muraken told Gilly that he would have to starve Jin out to get a grip on himself, but Gilly said that she would probably make the master dinner. Muraken was jokingly jealous of Jin. And now we see that the action takes place in a luxurious room framed in gold. In it, the siblings discussed that there was no way Jin could defeat a white wolf warrior, and they joked that Jin could only defeat a bandit wearing a wolf skin. They wondered how he managed to do this since he had only just reached the 3rd rank. One of the sisters said that it was possible, but only if Jin met the weakest white wolf. This is Gina's sister, Anna Runkendel, the 9th standard bearer of the Runkendels. But Mayu Rankendel, the 8th standard bearer of the Rankendels, said that even so, it was impossible, and that it made even less sense that Mom believed Jin right away. She asked Mew if she thought so, and then we see Hayton and Daytona. They discuss whether Jin really killed the wolf. Hayton said that no matter what kind of monster Jin is, it's impossible. The problem isn't whether or not he killed the white wolf, but whether or not he moves to the advanced group. Daytona agreed. He said that if Jin studied with them, they would be finished, and they both imagined an evil genie in their head who wanted to beat them up. They agreed that it was terrible. Then someone called them. It was Mew, and she asked them what they were whispering about, if they were afraid of what would happen when their little brother came to them. They said they weren't afraid, and Anna smilingly told them not to lie to their older sister. Then she made a threatening face and said that what she hated most was being lied to, so much so that she was ready to rip out their tongues. The twins, under pressure from their sisters, admitted that they were afraid of Jin. Then she offered to help, she allowed them to use them, she told them not to miss their chance and take slaves. The twins were happy. In the advanced group, everything follows the laws of the jungle. Both knights of the 3rd and 5th rank are engaged here. Newcomers are mixed with those who have been here for 10 years. Miu and Anna choose several cadets and turn them into their. She allowed me to take them and show Junior where he belongs, because they don't like him either. Then she grinned and told them to hold on if they didn't make it. Meanwhile, Jin took a dip and talked about how he had completed the first task, so it was finally decided to transfer him to the advanced group. In addition, his shadow energy had reached the 4th rank, and if he wants to use it properly, he should reach the 6th rank in swordsmanship in 5 years. Knights of the 6th rank are excellent swordsmen, 7th masters, and those who have reached the 8th rank and above are considered exceptions to the rule. For every 2 million people on the continent, there are barely 100 who have reached the 9th or 10th rank, and only one could go even further, the demigod, Star Knight and part-time father of Jin Shiren Rankandle. Jin firmly believed and was determined that in this life he would be able to become a Star Knight, and he wanted to surpass his father even more. Suddenly we are transported to another place. We see someone knocking on the door. Rose was sitting in the room. She allowed us to enter. It was Jin, and he asked his mother if she had called him. Jin's mother, Rose, said that she did call for him. She told Jin that she had heard that he had successfully completed his mission and that she was very happy with his results. He thanked her for her words. Suddenly Rosa started talking about Petro's report, and she said that she understood that Jin had refused her advice to move to another room. She asked Jin if he knew that only the child who becomes the next ruler can use these chambers. This room has been empty since Joshua the Jew used to live in it when he was younger, but it's time for Jin to take over the room. Jin thanked his mother but said that he couldn't accept the offer. When asked why, he said that no matter how good the room is, it remains just 4 walls. Besides, it is too luxurious and big for him, according to him. When asked if Jin really didn't want to live there, he said that he really didn't want to and had already made up his mind. His mother just tapped her finger on the table and then let him go. When Jin left, she speculated about whether the younger one didn't have a drop of greed or whether there was too much of it. She was thinking about what she had offered quarters for those of the children who would become the head of the Rankandle family in the future. Rose is sure that Jin knows about the support he will receive from the moment he enters this room, but he will become a target for those who did not get this opportunity. She assumed that Jin probably realized that she was testing him, that his mother would be looking forward to Jin's results in the intermediate class. And here we see Jin standing in front of the cadets, telling them that from tomorrow they will be transferred to the intermediate training class, which consists of several factions. They found a place in his faction. He warned them that they would get caught up in territorial battles and face aggression. But he told them not to be afraid because he wasn't just going to watch if something happened. He said that it would all disappear once he completely left the intermediate class. Until then, he asked them to move in groups of 3, even if they weren't in training, and not to act alone. And now we see the following picture. Here is Zed Runkandle, the eldest member of the Runkandle family, a knight of the 8th rank, and the younger brother of Shiren Runkandle. He's standing in front of the cadets. Zed has told them that a dozen recruits have dropped out this year and 27 have dropped out. He turned to the new students and told them to gain experience from their mentors in the intermediate class, and he would only teach them how to use the sword and evaluate their skills. Zed said they'd have to deal with everything on their own except for the murder. Then he turned to the mentors. He shouted and asked about what he always repeats. And all the mentors shouted that the Rankandle didn't need weaklings. They screamed again, and again they screamed louder. Jin just thought about how loudly they were trying to scare them. As they stood there, Jin noticed the twins, too. They also stood there and shouted that the Rankandle didn't need weaklings. Jin noticed that the ugly guy behind the twins seemed to have been training for quite some time, and there was no way the twins would defeat him alone. He realized that they must have enlisted the help of sisters Miu and Anna. Jin decided that even though they were trying to bully Jin and his faction, he had to let them know that they had misunderstood. Suddenly, he started walking towards his brothers and the guy standing next to him. The brothers were scared and didn't understand why he was going there, but they tried to reassure themselves that their sisters would support them. Suddenly, Jin unsheathed his sword and slashed at the guy standing next to the twins. The brothers were horrified. Zed was surprised to see it, too. Jin chopped off this guy's arm, and all the cadets froze in horror. The guy fell to his knees and screamed in pain, clutching his arm, or rather what was left of it. Jin thought that it shouldn't be him who was terrified, but them. Then he ordered a doctor to be called. Daytona took out his sword and started asking Jin why he did it and if he was. But Jin ignored him and turned to the cadet who had his arm cut off and asked him his name. The cadet introduced himself. His name is Kajin Romero. Jin then asked him if he knew why Jin had cut off his hand. At that moment, Daytona pointed his sword at Jin and asked why he was ignoring them and told him to draw his sword again. Jin frowned into his eyes and turned to his brothers, asking if they couldn't see that he was talking to Kajin, and also said that he would accept the duel later and told them to keep quiet. Hayton was infuriated, and he called Jin names and said how Jin dared to act like this after injuring his student. Suddenly, he closed his own mouth as if he had said something he didn't want to say. Jin understood what was going on, and when he heard that Kajin was part of the Hayton faction, he said that Kajin was looking at him too bloodthirstily, so he crippled him. The cadets were shocked when it turned out that a battle for political supremacy had begun between the brothers. Zed only enjoyed what he saw and was glad that the twins had been dealt a decent blow after trying to suppress their younger brother. Thanks to the twins, Kajin's position as part of their faction was stable. Because of this, Jin's actions weren't all that unpredictable, but the battle for hegemony is an established tradition in Rankandle. It was a very, very bold move from Jin. Jin then ordered all the new recruits to listen as he shouted out his name. He told them that they could point their swords at him or suddenly attack like he did. But he told them to keep in mind that if he saw even one hint of hostility, he would not hesitate to respond in kind, thus intimidating the cadets quite well. Suddenly Zed turned to Jin. Jin was ready to listen to him. Jin was calling him senior. Furious, Zed asked if Jin really thought he could do something like that in front of him. Jin answered without a moment's hesitation that he thought so. Jin said that he was confident that he would not fight the twins, but the older one. Zed was angry. He materialized an object in his hand, while also saying that Jin's words about fighting it were quite interesting. And now we see that Zed has a sword in his hand. He pointed his sword at Jin and ordered him to explain. According to Zed, depending on Jin's response, he can decapitate him. So Zed got angry and ordered Jin to explain. Jin replied that the senior had decided to use a unique technique to intimidate students, even though Jin was in the classroom. Jin was thinking about this when the older one attacked him. The elder swung his sword around. The sword passed very close with Jin, but Jin didn't even move and kept looking at the elder. There was a small cut on his face from the elder's punch, but he continued to stand still and only remained silent. Zed asked about how Jin didn't like Zed scaring the students, so he decided to make a fuss. Jin replied that, except for the fact that he didn't like it, it was exactly as Zed had said. Zed said that in such a case, Jin should have challenged him right away. Why would he hurt another cadet? Jin replied that it was because he couldn't beat him right now. Meanwhile, Bellup and Meza looked on in fear. Jin went on to say that if he thought he was going to win, he wouldn't have attacked Kajin or his brothers, but Zed. Zed said that Jin didn't seem to value his life too much or hope too much for the status of the patriarch's son, but Jin said that wasn't the case. The hero said that in his opinion, sitting idly by simply because his opponent is stronger than himself is not what a member of the Rankandle family would do. Zed looked at Jin seriously as he listened to this and then said that his death would only be a moment and his honor would be a legacy, and chuckled. The twins, like the other cadets, were surprised. How Zed said and grinned. Then he loudly said that Jin's bravado was so absurd that it made him, Jin's uncle, happy, and then he laughed out loud. The elder said that Jin should be allowed to do so, and that Jin was truly worthy of his surname. Then he turned to the cadets and told them to remember this day. Today, they saw what it was like to be in the Rankandle family. He said that this brat decided to show that they were crazy fanatics, then shouted at the cadets to fight and not forget who they were by clenching his fists. The senior officer released the cadets and informed them that their training would start tomorrow. The cadets were tense and scared. Jin, with his back to them, said that as their little brother, he was giving them advice. Right now, the twins are more afraid of their older siblings, but will it be the same in the future? He told me not to focus too much on what is happening now, and advised me to think better about the future. And now we're transported to Jin's room. He's back earlier. Then he turned to Jilly, who was bringing him tea, and said that he had declared the battle for hegemony to the twins. Jilly was surprised, and a drop of water slid down her face. But as Jin thought, the older sisters Mayu and Anna were probably covering for them. Jilly couldn't believe it, so she asked Jin again if he had actually declared a battle for the hegemony to both of them at once. Jin said that he had injured one of his brother's students, and after a bit of questioning, it turned out that this student of their sister's faction was his because his brother couldn't keep his mouth shut. Right now, the disciple belongs to the Gemini faction, and if the sisters find out about this, they will surely be furious. Jin said that there was no way his brothers would be able to recruit a 5th-ranked knight to their faction, since they usually recruit those who are weaker than them to their factions. Nervously, Jilly said that both sisters had already reached the rank of standard bearers, and she explained that there was an unspoken rule that standard bearers could only fight with other standard bearers. Jin said it was true, and he was glad that his sisters were holding him back. It's a huge blow to them, as they're both standard bearers, and they can't leave Jin's side yet. The only thing they can do is disrupt the distribution of his room and increase the difficulty of missions thanks to their authority. Then there is a chance that Jin will be injured or killed. But do not forget about single-player missions among those that come with high difficulty. That's where no one will be watching Jin, which means he can use all his power. Jilly wasn't nervous at all, but on the contrary, she was even happy and said that then this would be a great opportunity. Jin only said that he should thank his sisters and strive for more. All of a sudden, he picked up Moth and said that he was sure no one would mind if Jin took the cat with him. After Muraken gave a questioning meow, Jin said that he wouldn't take him on missions. For Muraken, he had something else to do. Muraken asked him what he was going to do, but Jin didn't answer, saying that he would tell them later, and until then Muraken and Jilly needed to lay low. And now we are transported to the training session. Zed said that they would all move out after finishing their day's training at the secret Runkendall family-only training ground. Only Hayton, Daytona, and Jean were standing there. The elder said that these were special privileges for purebloods, but warned them not to think it would be easy. Zed revealed that their family's sword skills are based on destructive power. They fight, they win, they own. Rangandal's character traits are reflected in this art. They don't have a specific definition, but there are secret techniques that can only be learned as a standard bearer. When Jin saw the twins' faces, he realized that it was probably the sisters' fault. Zed went on to say that fencing doesn't have a fixed form, whether it's a leg position or a stance. This is the main difference between the Rangandals and other noble families. He asked if they knew why. Jin raised his hand and replied that it was because of the unique physical abilities and talents that the Rangandals possess. It was Vero. My uncle said that being a Rangandal meant having a great bloodline. Their physical stats and sword skills were even beyond the dreams of an ordinary person. Zed said that if they had any minor flaws, their level was still much higher than average. That's why it was so easy for them to learn, Zed said with an evil smile. He gave each of the brothers a steel ball. Jin looked at the ball and thought that there was something inside. He assumed that there were steel parts. Zed said that this ball is called a pure stone, and when it hits, it makes a ringing sound. My uncle said they were going to hear 3 kinds of sounds, so he asked them to pay attention. The first time he hit the edge of the ball, the sound was so unpleasant that one of the brothers even had to cover his ears with his hands, and the others were clearly not happy either. Then he struck again, but this time weakly. For them, the sound was no longer unpleasant. As they understood, the sound of a stone depends on the force with which it is hit. If you hit it weakly, the sound will be quiet, but if you calculate the strength well, the ringing will be truly beautiful. The essence of training is to make sure that the sound is perfect with each beat. This is done to train the strength of the spirit, will, perseverance, and concentration. If you take into account the physical abilities of the Rankendall family, then this exercise is perfect, although its essence is simple. However, they only hit a piece of steel, which is too boring for the Rankendall's special training. So Zed made the last sound. Jin wondered what the third sound would be, because he could definitely hear that there was something inside the ball, like steel shards. While Zed was beating, Jin suddenly realized something. He ran to his brothers and shouted for them to fall down. The ball split, and then there was an explosion. He was very strong. The brothers were lying on the floor with Jin on top of them. They didn't know what had happened, but it was clear that Jin's reaction was good. Zed said that if they hit too hard, it would end up like this. And that's how they started training. After they survived the explosion and escaped unscathed, Zed said they were the first since Luna to be unharmed by the rock. Most of their siblings learned from him, so this brutal performance is part of the initiation. Zed never thought there would be another unharmed child. Jin then asked him if he could find out how Luna was able to escape the damage. Zed said that Jin would probably be disappointed when he found out, at least his brothers were annoyed. Zed said Luna didn't shy away like Jin did. Like the others, she took the blow on herself, but it was so strong that there wasn't even a scratch left on it. Zed told the 3 of them to start training anyway. He ordered them to beat until they could produce a clear sound at any time and in any situation. And now we are transported to the moon. Her Nanny, started talking about what Luna had said earlier. Luna asked if Nanny was saying that someone in the family wanted to kill Jean. Nanny said she suspected young ladies Mew and Anna. Given how much they try to keep an eye on Jean, Nanny is pretty sure the sisters had something to do with it. Even though it looked like they wanted to kill Jin, Luna still couldn't believe that the sisters would be so crazy as to try to kill in the Tempest Castle. She said that it was forbidden for those in the Tempest Castle to vie for inheritance. Besides, if Cheyenne found out about something like this, the family would be turned upside down and their own lives would be in danger. Nanny asked if there was a good chance that Jean had lied or taken the wrong approach. Jin was 10 at the time, so both options are possible. Since then, Luna and Nanny have been investigating for 5 years, but have not achieved any results. Luna doubted that Jin would lie. She thought of what he had said to her. She said he was careful with her then, not because he felt uncomfortable, but because he felt threatened with his life. It was in the air, Luna said. Nanny asked if young ladies Mew and Anna should be looked at. Luna said that she probably should and shared that she was worried about the fact that they still hadn't found anything. It was kind of creepy for her. Nanny said she was worried, too. She worries that Luna might be harmed by her siblings. Luna replied that she was able to survive her 30th birthday and made it clear to her that there was no need to worry so much. Luna said she hoped Jin was doing well. Nanny asked if she meant Master Jed's training. She said it was true. Jin should feel the effect of her mind-eye training. The clear stone really hits hard, Luna said. She was sure Jin was fine. She loved watching them grow up. We'll move on the next day. The training session started 4 hours ago. Jin and the twins were very tired. Then Zed gave them a 5-minute break. Jin thought it was an exercise to control his strength and develop his mind. But he was wrong. He needed to increase the destructiveness of his aura. Zed hit the rock without using it, but Jin doesn't have enough physical strength. So he decided that it needed to be strengthened with aura control. First, you need to focus the aura and achieve a clear sound. Only then can Jin break the stone. The main thing is not to rush. Even the twins were able to do this in their previous lives, so Jin was sure that he would definitely be able to do it. Zed looked at his brothers and thought that they were all holding up well, but when he looked at Jin, he thought that this kid was special. He wondered if Jin might be able to break Luna's record. And now we see that the day is already coming to an end. Zed told Jin to tell them that if they were going to be tomorrow, they weren't coming at all. As the brothers left, Zed pondered. The twins were exhausted much later than he thought. They are real Rankandellas, after all. And then there's the youngest, and suddenly after that, Zed starts to get angry about why Jin is the youngest. Zed believed that if Jin had been born 10 years ago, all the Rangandel forces would have been concentrated in his hand. Then he said that his brother was a disgrace. Then Zed sat down, annoyed, and repeated what a shame it was. We are now fast forward a month to March 1975. Middle-class cadets are being trained. The man announced that the middle class had received their first mission. Those cadets whose names he named should come forward. Their first mission is security. They are assigned to guard the new recruits from the Blacksmith Association. Then he called out the names. The third mission is the destruction of demonic creatures. The target of the mission will be orcs. Location: unprotected lands of the Kurano Principality. He looked at the page he was reading from. He didn't understand something or was surprised, and then read out the names. Mesa and Ballop were among them, and they were shocked. The man said that there were 2.5 dozen orcs on them that needed to be destroyed. And as the orcs move in rootstock or groups, they will have to muster their resolve and give it their all. The man said that this was all and wished everyone good luck. The cadet ranks began to talk about how destroying orcs wasn't for new recruits. They discussed that those sent on a mission would return half dead. Suddenly, a cadet standing next to Kajin. He grinned and said that he thought they should prepare incense and graves. Kajin said he had a moment before leaving for the mission and asked if they would like to make a will. One of the cadets got angry, but the other one continued to sneer, insinuating that Jin's faction was very weak without him. Meza pulled away one of the faction cadets and told Tomet to keep his cool. So far, they are not strong enough to compete with them. There's a mission ahead. You'll still have time to hurt yourself, Meza said. Tomet started snapping, and that's when Meza lost her temper. She told him to stop and stand still. She said that since their commander was Rankandel, they should focus on the mission they received and return unharmed after her successful application. She said it was the only way they would put them in their place. We see that the brothers continue to train with clean stones. Suddenly Hayton hit him too hard and blew him up, sending shards of rock flying straight at Jin. Hayton asked Jin if Lion was okay, to which Jin replied that he was still alive and asked not Hayton to do it somewhere far away from him. It's been a month since Jin started training with pure stones. His older brothers started blowing them up, but Jin had a strange feeling. It was as if a path of iron beads had appeared in front of his eyes and was imprinted as clearly as the trajectory of an arrow, and if the pure stone shards hit him again, he would definitely be able to dodge. Perhaps this was the perception that Luna had trained him in. Jin decided that before he forgot, he should try again. But suddenly Zed asked for attention and said that they were assigned a mission. The brothers whined about being sent to the celebration. They are being sent to the Bement Empire. Zed offered his condolences and said that thanks to them, the rest of the brothers wouldn't have to dance at the imperial reception. But he chided them for even if it's such a small thing, aren't they ashamed to sigh about their mission? He said that if he saw it again, he would make you dream of death. The brothers were terrified. Jin also thought that the Mayu and Anna sisters were also mean, punishing their ignorant brothers by sending them to a social event in the Bement Empire. My uncle said it was a big event and it was hard to refuse even if you were a Rankandel. He ordered them to go there and learn something useful. The Blitznits are gone. Then my uncle looked at his notebook again and gave Junior a task. Jin's task is to eliminate Bip. The target is the toy of the Ice Palace Master Talaris. In other words, one of her many lovers. Zed asked Jin if he knew about the palace. Jin said he knew. The Ice Palace is a huge tower in the middle of the continent's western sea. It is owned by the master of the Ice Palace, the 51st Master Talaris Indorma, also known as the Spider of the Abyss. She became famous for being ruthless to anyone who attempted to kill her lovers. Zed warned that the palace and its master were very strong, and that this palace was beyond the reach of Rankandel or Zippel. Jin's target is Alcaro Shandor, who is accompanied by the Ice Palace's men and lives in the Mamita crime district. Hearing this, the twins were taken aback. The twins whispered that if it was in Mamita, they would know that the knights had ordered it and that it was too much even if the younger one was so good. The customer was the Shandor family itself. They ordered the murder of their own. It looked like the family couldn't get Alcaro back, so they decided to kill him. Jin said firmly and decisively that he would do it. Zed was surprised by Jin's choice, because if Jin had refused, Zed would have talked to the knights. My uncle laughed and told Jin that he liked his straightforwardness. The uncle said that the three of them would leave in 3 days. The twins couldn't believe that the younger one would actually go to Mammoth. My uncle said that since Jin agreed, there was no need to stop him. Suddenly, the brothers approached Jin. They said that in case of danger, he would open up, then they would not touch him. They were worried about Jin. Jin told the older brothers to decide who they liked best, him or the sisters. Zed then turned to Hayton and Daytona and said that Jin was telling them not to go against him if they wanted to live happily ever after. Then we fast forward a few days. Meza and the other cadets came out to see Jin off, and she asked him if he was going to Mammoth. She noticed that his hair is a different color. Jin said that he can't go there as a rank handle, so he disguises himself. Jin said that their tasks are different, so they need different gates. After asking them about the mission, Jin replied that they looked gloomy and asked if something was wrong. Meza said everything was fine and they came to say goodbye. Jin asked about what it means to say goodbye, and she said that it won't be the last time they see each other. Meza said that if it didn't go so well, one of them might die, to which Jin replied that nothing would change from their excitement and advised them to focus on their task. Until he returned, he asked not to waste his energy and worry in vain. Jin said goodbye to Bellup, too. Jin then asked Jilly to keep an eye on them. Murakin in the form of a cat told Jin not to worry, because this body is gorgeous black, but the genie should not be caught or noticed. Before leaving, Murakin told Jin that he had to be careful not to be discovered, and advised him not to be careless because of his miracle disguise. Jilly said Sir Murakin hadn't arrived yet, and it would be quiet for a while. Jin told her to think of it as a vacation and that he would bring her some souvenir. Gilly said that he was worried about him because he had to kill the mistress of the Ice Palace's lover. Although Jin isn't just an ordinary cadet, Mammoth is a very dangerous place, so Gilly asked Jin to take care of himself. Jin got on his horse and said goodbye to the nanny. The place Mammoth went to is a crime district, a place where the most repulsed criminal elements gather. And now we see that a man came into the bar and shouted to everyone to meet the new guy. This man's name is Tonk. This bar is a hideout for criminals. Because of the energy that comes from these creepy types, they say that even grass doesn't grow. And then we see Jin enter the bar. The people sitting there were a little surprised that it looked like they really had a new one. After entering the bar, Jin tossed a silver coin and said that there would be a glass of water and a light snack. Everyone was surprised at his audacity because he's just a kid. Tonk went up to Jin and told him that Jin was new, but he was acting like one of them. Tonk asked him where the genie came from, if it was some rank 9 knight from a faraway land. Then he viciously said that since Jin had arrived in Mammoth, he should learn his rules. He ordered him to kneel down and then do something else, but Jin didn't let him finish and stabbed him in the throat. Blood splattered on the table, and Tonk died. Jin put the knife down on the table and asked him how long he would wait. Everyone in the bar was shocked, and then they laughed out loud and started drinking, saying that they expected Tonk to die like this. Jin just kept thinking that just like Zed had said, all the madmen gathered here. Zed had told Jin that if he wanted to impress the local outcasts, he needed to show them his strength and fearlessness. Jin had received a huge amount of support in his previous life, and he hoped that one day he would be able to repay Zed. So the bartender handed Jin a glass of water and a light snack, saying he hadn't poisoned them. Jin said that poisons are not favored here, and he knows it. The bartender said that Jin was well informed and asked if he had anyone from around here. Jin said it was none of his business. Then the bartender started asking Jin what he wanted. He offered him drugs, said the last batch was pretty good, and also asked if he was looking for someone. Jin asked if someone who introduced himself as Easter had passed by. The bartender said that he was absolutely sure that such a person was not here, so Jin asked him to tell him where to spend the night. No bedbugs or anything like that. The bartender said there was only one place, an inn in the west of the city, the Moonwell. He said that even kings stay there, so Jin can rest easy. So Jin came to the Moonwell Inn. As he walked, he thought about the task at hand. Alcaro Chandra, son of the Count. He grew up not knowing what need was, going crazy with entertainment and pleasure. All he has is a noble family name, Alcaro, a man who trembles before the strong and mocks the weak. The reason he's staying in such a dangerous city is because he wants to attract the attention of the mistress of the Ice Palace, so the only place he can be is a hotel. Jin thought of the new drug the bartender had mentioned and assumed that Alcaro was brewing it in his room. Jin also assumed that if Alcaro was the Ice Palace master's lover, then he must have security guards. So Jin went into the hotel to investigate the situation in the lobby first. And the first thing he saw was a disgruntled Alcaro yelling at the knight. Jin was lucky, he didn't think that he would meet him so soon. Alcaro, meanwhile, continued to argue with the knights. He was fiercely begging them for something. One of them said that something was wrong and that it was their duty to protect him. The knight was about to say something about Alcaro's pampering, when suddenly Alcaro shut him up, saying that he didn't even want to hear about it. Alcaro said that if he got it, he would do anything for them, and he called them names and said that when his darling came back, he would blow their heads off. The knight behind him sighed heavily, and Alcaro was angry, and he was beginning to boast that he was a member of the Chandra family, and they were peasant brats, when suddenly the knight knocked him out with a blow. The knights obviously didn't want to protect Alcaro, because he wasn't very smart. They would be happy if he died of an overdose. The guard said that he didn't understand why they should let Alcaro live, but they were still determined to do what they had to do without any reasoning. Jin analyzed the security detail. Alcaro's security is about level 6 or so, he thought. He also knew that killing Alcaro would be much easier than he thought. Problems will start after. Jin needs to get him out of the way, avoid the guards, and stay safe. Jin reflected that it was an unspoken rule of Mammoth not to use poison. Everyone would be insulted if he used poison, and the guards might get in the way. Alcaro should be removed quietly in the secret room of the Moonwell, Jin thought, and slamming his palm down on the table, he made up his mind to act. And here we see some people coming and discussing how many guardians Alcaro has. The girl clearly hates Alcaro, saying that all the difficulties are because of him because he doesn't know his place. One of the knights walking nearby said that it would be over for today. He called the girl mistress and said that she came personally to get rid of him. They are going to the Moonwell, and the girl said that she can get rid of his kind at any time. She continued by saying that she couldn't wait to tell them the good news. Suddenly, thunderclouds appeared in the sky, lightning flashing everywhere. The guard said it was from the Moonwell side. The girl said they were crazy and definitely picked the wrong day. And now we see Jin again, who has decided that he will raise the entire Moonwell with magic directly from the room. Once he added the 4th rank shadow energy, he would gain the destructive power of the 6th. That way, everyone will assume that the mage is at least rank 6, and no one will be able to suspect Jin, because who would think of a brat who is barely 15? After all, even Verid and Zippel barely reached that level. In addition, due to the properties of shadow energy, Jin will not leave any traces of using magic, so there will not be a single reason for suspicion. He decided that a lightning bolt would be enough to make it look like it had come from outside. As the shadow began to gather around him, he used the release of shadow energy. We see that Jin is surrounded by darkness while summoning lightning. He said that no matter how much he thinks, this plan is a bit crazy, and so he began to summon lightning. It was Jin who created the lightning bolt that struck over the Moonwell. It turned out that the girl was Ceres Indorma, the commander of the 7 swords of the Ice Palace, the daughter of the master of the Ice Palace. Lightning struck the building and destroyed it. The guard told Ceres that it seemed some high-ranking mage had a grudge against the Moonwell. Ceres said it was probably true, but the mage might be up to their liking. Ceres added that there were 6 palace men in the inn, and that her mother's lover, Alcaro, was definitely there. Ceres told them to hurry up, prioritizing the lives of their people, and said that Alcaro didn't care. The entire sky was blue with the glow of lightning. Suddenly, another bolt of lightning struck right in front of the girl. The bandits fled in terror. They thought it was one of Zippel's magicians, because one of them had recently killed Zippel, but it turned out that this bandit was lying. Suddenly, one of the guards got scared and started to run away, but suddenly lightning struck in front of him. It was incredibly strong, stronger than the others. Etten was shocked. Ceres said that judging by the force of the impact, it was the last attack. Ceres hoped they were okay. Suddenly, Jean emerged from the rubble. He was thinking about the fact that his last lightning bolt, which he had spent all the energy of the shadows on, was very close in power to the 7th rank. He managed to avoid serious injuries thanks to the pendant. Jin saw that the Ice Palace guards were alive, but he didn't see Alcaro. Jin thought that if Alcaro had survived, this was a great chance. But suddenly Ceres appeared in front of him and was surprised that there were people of her own age in Mamita. She asked Jin if he was okay and said that he had been hurt by lightning. Ceres said getting out of here would be a great solution and told Jin to move and get up. Etten said that their men were hurt, but they were all safe. This was a relief to Ceres, who ordered everyone to gather outside, and if Alcaro was with them, she ordered them to kill him. Ceres said that magic was uniform and that it was definitely one person, and ordered them to capture the magician if they found him. Jin realized that the Ice Palace Master's daughter was standing in front of him, and from her words, he deduced that she had come to deal with Alcaro. Jin decided that Alcaro was going to die anyway, so there was no point in leaning out. The problem was something else. It would be bad if the daughter of the Ice Palace Master remembered him. Jin decided that he needed to hide his face as much as possible and pretend that he was damaged in this mess in order to leave as soon as possible. One of the guards said it was a shame that Alcaro had been killed by a magical attack, which meant that they had failed the mission to escort him, but Ceres wasn't so annoyed. She said that she had come to relieve them of this burden, and that she had had enough of his whims. Jumping onto a small dais and raising her sword, Ceres loudly announced that the inn was now under the control of the Ice Palace. She also shouted her name and said that she was the daughter of Talaris, the master of the Ice Palace, and the commander of the 7 swords of the Ice Palace. She said that anyone who resisted would be declared an enemy of the Ice Palace. 2 bandits decided to object. She shouted that they didn't care whose daughter she was there, it was Mammoth. The second man shouted that it was the kings of this city who ruled here, not Ceres, and that maybe the Ice Palace was to blame for the attack. In an instant, she cut off their heads. As she had said, the protesters would become enemies of the palace. Then, she said that playing the ruler of this garbage pit really allows you to look down on the Ice Palace. Ceres said that if it turned out that the attack was caused by the Ice Palace, the bandits would receive compensation. But what if the maid's target was them and the Ice Palace was an accidental victim? And she asked if it was not clear why they should take control of this place. The bandits told them to do what they wanted and that they agreed that this magician should be found and killed. Ceres replied that of course they would start looking for the mage among the survivors, but it couldn't be any of them. There wasn't a single mage there. Ceres said who knows whose anger the bandits might have attracted, and immediately told them to keep their objections to themselves. And then she went back to Jin. She asked why a kid like him was still here when she said to leave. Jin said he was just a little scared and hurt his leg and apologized. Ceres laughed and said that he must be too cowardly for a man and too cute for a swordsman. She took out some salve and told Jin to roll up his pant leg. She said that Jin was lucky to have survived the attack and that she, Ceres, was sharing the medicine with him, and she told him to take it as a great honor. Jin asked how he could repay her kindness, but she smiled and said it was nothing. She asked how someone like him could repay someone like her. She told him to think of it as a pleasant memory and thank the Ice Palace now and then. So she said goodbye to him, and Jin waved back. Jin's mission was accomplished, and so we see cadets killing ogres. They just killed the 18th ogre. One of the cadets said that he thought they would return at this rate without any losses. Cadets Tamint and Scut were happy that everyone would survive and rubbed their noses at those who laughed at them. But Meza immediately interrupted them, telling them not to relax because there are still 7 monsters roaming around. Meza had thought that orcs usually moved in groups, but these ones moved singly, so they were easier to kill. She thought that the gods were watching over them after all, or that Master Jin was blessed and that the blessing affected them as well. She told everyone to return to the search and ordered that no one relax until the end of the mission and that everyone remain vigilant. And now we see that Mirakin in the form of a cat is watching them from the bushes. He was bored because all he could do was wait for the cadets to catch the remaining 7 before he could go home. Suddenly, we're flashed back a few days to when Jin's squad started their mission. We see the orcs gathered in a large group. Mirakin, standing on the dais, ordered them to listen and said that from now on they should walk one at a time. He threatened them that if they disobeyed his orders or hung around in pairs, he would destroy them all. He told them to get out of his sight if they understood. The orcs scattered in fear, and now we are transported back to the present. Miraka in the form of a cat talks about how Jin forced him to do such unworthy things. He wondered what if Jin was a millennial contractor. Mirakin was not happy that everything was on Gina. As he watched Jin's party from the tree, all he could think about was what would make him buy new manhwas when he got back. In this body, Mirakin needs to do everything possible so that the squad returns from the mission in full force. Suddenly, Mirakin noticed someone approaching. Mirakin was confused. That someone was coming from the other side. Mirakin couldn't figure out where they'd come from, but he knew that the cadets wouldn't be able to just come back. Then Mirakin was forced to use shadow energy. The good thing was that the cadets were somewhere in the 3rd rank. After all, if it was Jin, he would have instantly noticed Mirakin's barrier. And now we see how the shadow outlined a circle, and then a dome was formed. Belop noticed something. He noted that it was getting dark rather suddenly, but he thought it was going to rain. As we can see, there is no face on the head of this huge knight, only something big and glowing red. Mirakin transformed into a dragon and started flying towards whatever was approaching. He was outraged that someone dared to send their warriors without his permission. As he approached, he saw that it wasn't a living creature, but a relic from ancient times. It was a grave giant, with a shield in one hand and a spear in the other, and the giant was completely covered in armor. Mirakin was sure that his dragon clan had gotten rid of the grave giants a couple of thousand years ago. Besides, he couldn't understand how a giant guarding the graves of dead gods could be here. It wasn't a pleasant meeting. At this moment, Mirakin started to form a ball of shadow energy. He wanted to end the grave giants in one fell swoop. He used shadow energy on the giant. From such a force, the giant began to collapse. Its eye burned red for a while, but soon the eye went out and the giant fell to the ground. Mirakin began to descend and descended to the ground. He reincarnated as a human and said that he hadn't used his powers in so long that his bones were cracking. Mirakin said there was no way the grave giant could have appeared here by accident. No matter how much he thinks about it, the Zippel family is clearly involved. He couldn't understand what was going on in this world. Mirakin decided that it would be best if he didn't tell Jin anything yet, because if something happened, Mirakin would be able to protect him. Mirakin was thinking that Jin had grown a lot in 10 years. He was sure that he had enough strength to go up against the Zippels. Suddenly we are transported to a workshop, and now we see for the first time the magician of reincarnation, Buber Gaston. He told Bishkal that there was a problem with Buber's creation, the grave giant, and Buber was very nervous. The one who entered the room was Bishkal Ibriano, the head of the Kinzello terrorist group. Bishkal said that he had already heard the news and that as far as he knew, the cadets were attacked by the grave giant during the night. Buber said it was true, but he would never have thought that anyone would dare destroy his precious creation. Bishkal said that this is not so important now. After all, the one who defeated the giant is a dragon. Moreover, the shadow dragon, Bishkal said that he specially went there personally to check everything out in person. Buber got nervous and asked Bishkal if he meant that the dragon had noticed their work. Bishkal said he wasn't sure, but he thought it was a warning. Bishkal then told Bubara to look around here and that he would send people to help. After all, he urgently needs to meet with the Zippel family. We are transported to the castle and see the following picture. Zed, with a smile on his face, praises Jin for successfully completing the mission and returning from Mammoth in one piece. Zed said that the bannermen who gave Jin this assignment would be surprised. Well, they'll be furious when they find out how it went. So Zed ordered all the fighters to disperse. Jin and his squad stood and congratulated each other on their successful missions. Jin told the group that they had done a great job, and they said they were very happy that Jin was safe. Then we see the cadets standing in the distance start discussing them. One of them said that by some miracle on the same day, the magician staged a terrorist attack at the hotel where the target of the task was staying. One of them said that Mr. Jin was really lucky. Another began by saying that they live in an unfair world, because not only is Rankindle kissed by fate, while some people, no matter how hard they try, still can't get above the average cadet. One of the cadets said that he didn't know how skilled they were, but young Master Jin was only rank 4 and his cadets were only rank 3, and then asked Kajin if he was going to leave it like this. Kajin said that even if he was arrogant and the youngest lord, he still had pure Rankindle blood in his veins. Kajin said they couldn't do anything until the lady gave the order. Suddenly, Jin came up to them. They started whispering about whether Jin had heard them. Jin said that, unfortunately, he had excellent hearing. The cadets were surprised. Jin asked Kajin if his arm was okay. Kajin replied that the doctors said that with the way Jin cut it off, it would be easy to restore it. Jin said it looked like the cadets were having a very interesting discussion. Kajin replied that most of them, ordinary people who encounter people like Jin, whisper behind their backs and ask them not to pay attention. Jin said that no matter what he does or doesn't do, as long as he doesn't become a standard bearer, it's none of their business. Kajin asked what kind of flogging he would get if Jin wanted it. Jin asked why he would do such a thing, to which Kajin replied that it was because he was being extremely brazen. Jin said that Kajin really is an eyesore. Kajin got up in a huff and said that he didn't think it was pleasant for anyone to watch a young master receive universal acclaim after completing a mission based on pure luck. Jin said that it looked like there was a misunderstanding. He didn't say that because Kajin was making fun of him and acting impudent. Jin told Kajin that as a 5th rank knight with outstanding abilities compared to intermediate class cadets, Kajin should be stronger than Jin. Taking out his sword, Jin asked so why did he choose to discuss behind his back. Jin reminded Kajin that he could challenge him at any time. Jin told Kajin to draw his sword and that there was no need to give in to him anymore. Jin wanted to deal with everything properly. Kajin said that it sounded like Jin didn't want them to put an aura restriction. Jin said that Kajin understood correctly, to which Kajin responded by drawing his sword, saying that Jin would regret it. Kajin attacked Jin, but he blocked them. Jin was thinking that Kajin's attacks were really heavy, but he wasn't a match for the ones Jin was going to fight. While fighting, Kajin shouted in anger that Jin was still too weak to fight him. Jin blocked Kajin's next attack, but then Kajin hit him. After another swing of the sword, Jin had an idea. Something occurred to him, something that was happening to him like the day a steel ball hit him because of Hayden, and he began to understand the trajectory of Kajin's next strike. There are an infinite number of places that a Kajin can hit, but not so many for a 5th ranked knight. especially when the enemy is not visible behind the blinding veil of anger. So Jin decided to finish him off in 3 strokes. They exchanged words, Jin saying that Kajin can't beat him because Jin reads all his actions. Kajin said that Jin keeps saying such meaningless things. Jin made a backhand push, then an unexpected uppercut, and then the final attack. He created an aura of power around the sword that the 4th rank couldn't even dream of successfully blocking. Kajin's sword flew away, and Kajin himself fell to the ground. Kajin couldn't figure out how Jin had just blocked the kick. Pointing the sword at Kajin, Jin said that he knew how many years it had taken him to reach the 5th rank. Kajin asked if Jin had deceived him. He didn't know that Jin was ranked 5. He said that he wasn't lying, that Kajin just didn't know anything about him. Jin never gets into a fight if he knows he's going to lose. Suddenly the 2 brothers Hayton and Daytona came running, shouting about what had happened. When they saw this picture, they suddenly stopped and were surprised. They couldn't believe that their little brother had defeated Kajin. As Jin walked past them, he said it was easy. The twins were shocked. And then we see the sisters asking Kajin if Jin really beat him. Kajin said that he was very ashamed of himself. One of the sisters asked if Kajin had been bribed or if he had succumbed because Jin had run candle. Kajin said none of that. Mayu asked what was the matter then. She couldn't believe that Kajin was seriously claiming that a 15-year-old boy had defeated a rank 5 knight so quickly. Kajin said that not only he, but everyone who was on the training ground can confirm. Kajin also added that Jin's strength surpasses rank 5. Grinning, Mayu said that it was her own fault for expecting something like this from someone like Kajin and told her to just leave. And so the sisters were left alone. My sister said that she thought the younger one was showing them his teeth. Mayu replied that it wasn't just them, Jin was grinning at the whole family. Mayu said that on Gina's next mission, experiment with their kids. This must be the place from which he will return dead. Next, we see Gilly telling Jin that there is a commotion in the Garden of Swords. Everyone is amazed by his abilities. Jin said the first chapter, Father and Sister Luna. In the entire history of the Runkendels, only 3 became 5th rank knights at the age of 15. And so Wu Jin now has the 5th rank of swordsmanship, 4th of magic and shadow energy. Jin hadn't even expected this level of swordsmanship. After all, he was just training normally with a pure stone and had reached the 5th rank. As he stared out the window, he thought that it looked like if one of his 3 powers, shadow energy, magic, or aura became stronger, it affected the others. When Jin was overloaded with shadow energy earlier, he opened up auras and mana afterward. No one has ever possessed such abilities in history, so it's useless to search for records, but Jin is sure that these 3 powers are definitely connected. Suddenly Jin noticed the flowers and asked Jilly if she had put them up. Jilly said they were brought in while Jin was away, so she didn't clean them up. Then she asked if she should get rid of them. Jin said no need, there are no curses on the flowers and everything is fine. Returning to the topic of conversation, Jin said that since they discovered that he had become a 5th rank knight at 15, his brothers would start to get a little nervous, including brother Joshua, who is vying to be the next head. And they show us Joshua Rankendel. When Luna Runkendel relinquished her position as first standard bearer, the second standard bearer of Runkendel became a strong candidate, and with the support of his mother, Rose Runkendel, he secured the position. Jin said that it would be a good idea to hide the abilities until the time comes, and he decides that revealing his achievements will do more good. Since it was reported that Jin had reached the 5th rank, news of him would spread further than Rankendel and would surely be covered in the press as well. Nurakin said that Jin is so open about complimenting himself. Nurakin is sure that if Jin becomes the center of attention, then his brothers will become more obedient. Jin said that was true, but more importantly, Father would personally arrive at the Sword Garden. And then they were both surprised. Shire needs someone else to be the heir. Other than Luna, his father was never happy with any of Jin's seniors. Sister Luna, who was the only one who got his attention, was not interested in the throne, so he decided that she was not suitable for the role of head of the family. Then Joshua strengthened his position. Brother Diff, Sister Runcha, and Sister Marie became temporary successors. This line was set in stone, but things have changed since Jin came along. Jin thought about how Shire didn't look at age. Father is the kind of person who gives everyone a chance, so he will chase Jin around just like when he was a regular rank. Jai is sure that his orders will include 2 things. First, it's a test of whether Jin can overcome the age gap between him and his brothers. The second is protection, and Shire doesn't want Jin to die at the hands of his relatives before he passes the test, because Jin is a special case. Jilly said that if Jin's story was published in the newspapers, he would be inundated with invitations from families and groups from all over the world. Jin said that she was right, but Jin had a plan to deal with all the meetings at once, which was to hold a banquet when Shire arrived. He told Jilly to be ready and told her that it would be her responsibility to keep a particularly vigilant eye on Murakin. If Murakin turned into a human and made his way to the reception, it would be the end of them. Murakin, surprised, jumped up and said that he was not a child and he had no intention of doing this. And so a few days passed. Jilly says that the butler seems to be very busy answering an endless stream of emails. When she asked Pedro, it turned out that even the ruling family of the Bement Empire wasn't left out. Jin said it was funny that they were also very curious about what was going on. Jilly said that the head had sent a schedule of home visits through Han. Shiren is scheduled to arrive in a month, so even the arrival dates of other families were scheduled. Jin noticed that the young gentleman had become quite quiet lately. He said that if they tried to take control of him when everyone's attention was on him, it would be like showing either their fear or hatred. Suddenly, the butler entered the room, shouting. He was shocked and said that Jin was assigned a mission and sent straight to the ruins of Colin. Then we see Jin's mother, Rose Rankendall, yelling at the flag bearers. She asked how they, who call themselves standard bearers, could have done their job so badly. She was furious that they'd sent Junior to Zippel territory. Suddenly the door opened and Jin came in, and my mother calmed down at the same time. There were standard bearers in the room, among them Runsha Rankendall, the third standard bearer of the Rankendells, Ran Rankendall, the fifth standard bearer, Vigo Rankendall, the sixth standard bearer. Rose asked Jin if he had already heard that his next mission was in the Colin ruins. Jin replied that he had, but Rose immediately said it was cancelled. There is no chance that Jin will go to Colin. The sisters were outraged and decided to object, but Rose was furious and shut them up. She said that they only think about killing the younger ones. Miu asked if it was weird. The second sister also said that she didn't understand why my mother was protecting the little one. Rose said that if the sisters were crazy, then let them continue to talk nonsense. The sisters began to talk about how their mother and father had always silently forgiven their quarrels. They asked if it was because their family needed competition. She said that she was sure that everyone here grew up fighting. Second sister said that it was true. After all, she had been sent on ruthless missions so many times when she was only mid-rank. Rose finally agreed and said that competition is really needed, no matter what the methods and techniques are. But then she asked if they had reached the 5th rank at 15. The sisters were shocked. Rose said that Junior was different from all of them. She said that if they had jumped to the level of a junior at his age, she would have protected them too, but the sisters didn't deserve her protection. Rosa said that he could see the state they were in now that they were standard bearers, and he didn't regret it in the least. Then she turned to Runsha, Ran, and Vigo. She said that since the three of them were also standard bearers, they were responsible for the ruckus the sisters had caused. She ordered Runsha to practice self-discipline for a while, and Rana and Vigo to return one family sword each from their vaults. Rose said that if it was up to her, she would have taken all the prestige swords they had, so the brothers still got off easy. With that all sorted out, Rose wondered what action Jean would take next. In this situation, with Rose dragging in his non-Eddie siblings, Rose wondered if Jin would pretend and coax her to relent or enjoy favoritism. She wanted to see how he would resolve this situation. So Jin turned to his mother and said that he really liked the mission assigned by the sisters. Shocked, his mother asked him if he really meant it, knowing what a rotten place the Colin ruins were. Jin said he knew it was part of the Zippel territory that the Rankendall had wanted in the past and failed to get. The sisters were also shocked. Jin said he understood the risk, but he wasn't going to back down in this battle. He said that he thought the mission assigned to him was fine. Jin told the sisters that the place was really dangerous, but he didn't believe it was an irrational decision. He said that the sisters probably thought that he had quite high abilities, so Jin turned things around in his favor. Rose said it was reckless and asked Jin if he was trying to make his mother lose her temper. Jin said no, and that if they suddenly decided to replace a person on a mission, it would be tantamount to admitting their incompetence. Rose said the partners wouldn't have suspected them of that. The Jin sisters are just trying to hurt him because they can't break him in battle using their authority. Jin also knows it's true, but she said that if he faced the sisters head-on, victory would be on their side, but if he succeeded in the mission, he would deal them a heavy blow. In other words, Jin saw a chance to win this battle. Rose said that the Colin ruins were a place where he could die if he made a wrong move and asked if he was sure he wanted to go there. Jin said that he was confident and asked if when he successfully completed the mission, he would be able to get the swords that were taken from his brothers. He said that this mission is marked dangerous, so he asked to get at least such a reward. Rand said that they were just swords and that if Jin wanted them so badly, he would give him one of the items he had so that Jin would forget about this mission. Rand asked Jin if he didn't think staying alive until his father arrived would be enough. Jin thought it was funny and said that if it was so important, Rand would have stopped the sisters before they assigned Jin a task. His mother interrupted their conversation and told Jin that if he successfully completed the mission, she would give him the swords of his brothers. After these words, she dismissed everyone. Rose was afraid that Jin would do what Luna did, so she trampled on the others' pride, but she realized that it didn't seem necessary. She was sure Shiren would be happy to see the younger one grow up well. When everyone was out of the office, Anna asked Jin if he really thought he was lucky. Jin said they probably didn't know, but he wasn't too lucky. Anna said that soon his calmness will fly off because the mission is a team one and Jin will not be alone. Jin thanked her for her concern and then said that they would see each other again. And here we see Jin meeting up with his team for this mission. Mile Has introduced himself first, then Lima Has, and Kajin was also in the middle. Mile said it was an honor to be with Jin and apologized for his past mistake. Lima said he doesn't make a mistake on a mission. Kajin added that this also applies to him. Jin forgave Kajin and offered to put the past in the past, where it belongs, and get to work. Kajin thanked the young master. Jin wondered what kind of honor it would be if all three of them were members of Mayu and Anna's faction. He thought they were planning to stab him in the back and blame it all on the danger of the mission. Mile said he would introduce Jin to the situation. This is a search mission. The place is the ruins of Colin. Artifacts to be found, 4 pistols. And here we will learn more about the Colin ruins. Initially, a native settlement was established on these lands, but now the territory belongs to the Zippels and is associated with the kingdom of Phylon. Although Colin was discovered several hundred years ago, the Zippels who stumbled upon the ruins and the local inhabitants killed and enslaved almost the entire population. Of course, now they say that they respect the locals, but this is only at first glance. Although they appear to be happy with their conditions, they are actually only the lives and rights of these natives are not important to most people, so they are ignored. Jean speculates that the reason Zippel spared their lives was to rule Colin's land. This is a hypocritical act of alleged redemption of the past. Usually, the Zippel family is committed to good governance and their people are genuinely loyal to them. Jin recalled that in any case, the Zippels had gone too far in their previous life and they had blackened their reputation for a reason, but all for the sake of a mirror-shaped artifact.